Welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast, brought to you by the All About Pigeons nonprofit organization, which is dedicated to promoting education and promotion of the pigeon hobby. Every week, a listener requests to drive our conversations about all things pigeons. Join me, Philip Fry, as we learn and share stories about these incredible birds and this ancient hobby. Welcome to this roller compilation episode. We've got some great roller episodes put all in one place. Perfect for a road trip to Pigeon Palooza coming up October 4th, or for a road trip to the NBRC convention coming up in November. Keep in mind, we can do these specific type of compilation episodes because we're covering all the different aspects of the pigeon hobby: roller, racing, fancy, tippler, health, nutrition, whatever you guys request. So no matter what side of the pigeon hobby you're a part of, all these episodes always have something for all the pigeon fanciers to take something away from. So just keep that in mind. Try not to look at an episode and think, well, I'm into the fancy side of the pigeon, so I'm not going to listen to the racer episode, or I'm a roller person, so I'm not going to listen to the fancy pigeon breeds. There's always something for everybody. It's pigeons. We all raise pigeons. We're feeding pigeons. We're breeding pigeons. There's always going to be some overlapping in there. And nonetheless, it's people talking pigeons. It's something that we all love to listen to in that aspect. So get comfortable. Prepare yourself for some ad-free, back-to-back episodes in this compilation that's all about the Birmingham Rollers. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we have with us Tu Yang, and we're going to talk about the Birmingham Roller pigeon history. Tu got his pigeons in 1996 at 12 years old. He was the chairman for the 2012 NBRC National Convention held in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He's also served as regional director for the NBRC and for the World Cup, as well as 5 years total as the NBRC Director of PR and Publicity. Thanks for coming on and talking rollers with us today, Tu.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the invitation.
Let's get into the history of the breed, where they come from, and how they got here in the States.
The breed we're talking about, Birmingham Rollers, hence the name Birmingham from Birmingham, England. The breed itself, the question just popped up today. Some of the guys were trying to figure out what breeds were used in the creation of the Birmingham Roller pigeon. It's much disputed. I don't believe it's written down anywhere, but I've chatted with Graham Dexter, who authored a couple of books. He's from England. He's probably one of the most knowledgeable rollermen in terms of roller history and the breed itself. And then we have Tom Munson here out in Salt Lake City. Both agree the breed was created 17th, 18th century using crosses between the Old Dutch tumbler, the common English tumbler, and the Persian/Oriental roller. And so that's how the breed was created. But it was created in the Black Country in the Birmingham, England area, hence the name Birmingham Roller.
Wow, 17th, 18th century. I didn't realize it was that old. I guess I assumed it was made pretty recently and brought over here.
Yeah, well, it was, first importation that's documented came in 1870s. And the first ad that we know of that we can go back to and actually find was in the May 1881 issue of the Homing Pigeon magazine. And there was an ad, a father-son duo out in Pennsylvania had advertised Birmingham Roller pigeons. And that's here in the U.S. So the first time that we've seen the name, the breed, Birmingham Roller was in 1881, advertised in that May 1881 issue of the Homing Pigeon. The birds existed here in the US and in Canada before Pensum. So like I said, they came, somewhere around the 1870s, maybe 1860s. The first shipments came here. We believe it came through Canada first. And then from Canada, most of it came to Pennsylvania and Ohio. Pensum, off the top of my head, I believe he was born in 1904. He didn't move to the US until right after World War II ended. He came in 1949, was in the East Coast just for a little bit before moving to Southern California and LA to live there. In terms of popularizing the breed, no one's done more for the Birmingham Roller in the US than Bill Pensum. He's the name that all the roller guys, if there's one name that anyone knows in roller pigeons, it's going to be Bill Pensum. I think that's what's fairly unique with rollers is we, in the US at least, we do have just one, forefather, godfather, and it's Bill Pensum.
How was it that he kind of really got it to take off? What were the things that he did to really get it going here in the States?
Going back just a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, rollers, Birmingham Rollers had existed here in the U.S. pre Bill Pensum. 1932 was the first shipment of pigeons. Father Schlotman, he was a Catholic priest from the St. Louis area. In 1932, he imported 6 pigeons from Bill Pensum. Bill was still living in England at that time, and so that was the first wave of Birmingham rollers from Bill Pensum that came over in 1932. And then from 1932 to 1949, it just exploded in terms of popularity. And those that had the Birmingham rollers that were here in the U.S. before the Pensum imports, most guys sort of moved away from those birds and gravitated towards these Pensum imports. And then in 1946, before Pensum came over, a bunch of guys in the U.S. who had these Pensum Birmingham rollers, they started a club called the Pensum Roller Club, and that's when the proliferation of the breed itself really blew up. And you had asked, what did Pensum do different? During that time, I wasn't alive then, but just going back, reading through all the articles, it just seemed like there weren't many roller men who were very good with the pen in terms of articulating themselves, writing articles. Pensum really put out articles in nearly every publication possible, and that really spread the popularity of the breed. And then once he came here to the US in 1949, everything just, like I said, everything took off with the PRC, which was the Pensum Roller Club. And that was created in 1946. And as I said, Pensum really pushed the Birmingham Roller, mostly through print, which hadn't been done before for this particular breed.
Was the Pensum Roller Club a competition for performance or show only, or?
Initially, when it started out as a club for the preservation of Birmingham rollers that could be traced back to Bill Pensum and or what was called Black Country rollers. And so Birmingham, England was part of the Black Country. So in order to be a member of this club, you had to have pedigrees or proof that these birds descended directly from Bill Pensum or pigeons from Birmingham, England. It was started out supposed to be a performance club. The Birmingham Roller is a performance breed. They do backward somersaults, and it was started as a performance club. Going back, looking through it, very few competitions were actually held while the PRC was in its heyday in the 50s and 60s. I think at one point in the 60s, they had 600 members in the US, and this is in the 1960s.
Oh, wow.
Towards the end there, they started moving, and this was a big issue with Birmingham rollers in the 60s. Unlike homers, and a lot of guys are familiar with homing pigeons. You can take the pigeons anywhere, they'll fly back home. Not necessarily anywhere, but a certain distance away, and they fly back home. With roller pigeons, in order to compete, the judge has to come to the flyer's house. So let's say I live here in North Carolina. If I were to compete and I was able to compete, the judge would have to come to my house and then score my birds at my property. And then the judge would leave my property and go to the next flyer's house, whether it be, it could be here in North Carolina or South Carolina or California. Logistically, it wasn't exactly the easiest thing to do is to hold a competition like that for, the PRC was a national club at that time. That's why at times competition is hard, but local areas had, small competitions between themselves. So the PRC did have, some competitions, but it's not the way that we have them today with the National Birmingham Roller Club and the World Cup.
So the competition side of it has been there for quite a while then in the States.
Yeah, well, it's been there from the get-go. There was rules from the get-go. Birmingham roller pigeons, like I said, we score them. There's traditionally it's a 20 bird kit, meaning the kit of pigeons you can have up to 20 birds, a minimum of 15, and then you can have up to 20 birds, and they perform in a kit of 20 pigeons. And we used tumbler rules at the beginning. I said all these birds came from tumblers, and so we used tumbler rules, which is they call them quarter turns. 5 pigeons in order to score, that's a 1/4. 10 pigeons would be half a quarter turn. 3/4 turn would be 15 pigeons, and a full turn, which is the holy grail, would be to get all 20 pigeons. A turn is a break, is to get the birds to perform to backflip together. And so tumblers in the old days, you just scored tumblers as long as you had 5 birds that did something. They did a couple of tumbles, somersaults, you would get points. It's evolved since then to now, you've had numerous guests on here who've talked about it. The minimum depth is 10 feet. So the birds have to roll, at least 5 birds have to roll 10 feet in order for them to score. Whereas in the old days, from the 1800s up until about the mid 1960s, even 1970s, it was still all tumbler rules, meaning you flew 20 birds. If 5 birds, 10 birds tumbled, rolled 5 to 10 feet, they would get scored. If you got a full turn, which means 20 birds rolled together, almost always guaranteed a win. It was very rare to see it happen. But the difference between then and now is we have depth and quality multiplier. So the deeper the birds are, the more points you get. Cleaner, the faster the roll, the more points you get. Whereas in the old days, it didn't matter if I had 5 birds that rolled at the same time, and they went 15 feet semi sloppy, I got the same amount of points as you would if you had five birds go 40 feet clean fast. There was no depth or quality factor in the traditional tumbler rules.
That's really interesting. It makes sense that it would be an adaptation from performing tumblers. The bar has definitely been set a lot higher.
In terms of the bar being set, like what we can, there's only so much a pigeon can do in terms of physical capability. I think in terms of we call them revolutions per second. Those of us that study this like a sport, how many backflips they can do in a second. So one full backflip would be one revolution. The fastest rollers that we've seen, it's all been pretty much agreed upon, about 10 revolutions per second. So a pigeon that does 10 backflips per second starts to blur in the eyes of a human being. On camera, you can still see the revolutions, but to the naked eye, once you get to 10 revolutions per second or 10 backflips per second, that bird starts to blur. Your eyes can't distinguish the revolutions anymore. I think 13.6 is the unofficial record of the fastest, roller pigeon doing 13.6 revolutions per second. And so I don't know how much faster these birds can do backflips, how many more revolutions they can do, but it seems like I'm not sure if they can do any more than what they did even, 20, 50 years ago. But the bar is moving based on trying to get more than just 5 or 10 to perform at the same time. The hit sensitivity, trying to get more pigeons to break or to roll at the same time with very good depth, very good, we call them style wing placement. So it looks like ideally when a pigeon rolls, you want to look like a ball. You barely want to see any wings, ideally no wings, but for the most part, you'll see some wings, but you want them to come down like a circular saw, just all the birds rolling like that, breaking like that.
And so on the other half of it, you got the birds and the clubs and everything else that are kind of evolving and coming out from the 40s there. What about the other half of it, the fanciers, the rollermen that are flying these birds? What were they looking for when it originated and started off compared to what's a rollerman looking for now?
Everything started in England, and even back then in the from early 1900s to about up to about 1980 or so here in the US and in England, most of the rollermen were chasing individual rollers. Those who are familiar with Bill Pensum, in his book he called it the champion roller. So just a bird that rolls inconceivably fast, like a blur, a ball straight down in a straight line. For a long time, even though it goes against what I just said in terms of scoring, they scored tumbler style, so you had to have at least five pigeons to roll. Most guys still wanted deep, fast rollers, and it didn't really matter at times if they went with the other pigeons. Everyone tried to breed for this deep, fast individual roller. That's what everyone wanted. They wanted that champion roller. And so from about the, beginning of the sport up until about the 80s, you wanted to breed more superstars. The teamwork took a back seat, and that's where, if we going from 80 to about now, that's where, as a whole, as Americans, we've fallen behind. That's reflective in the World Cup. We have far more participants in the World Cup than any other country. In fact, I think we have just the US alone, we have more kits flown than the rest of the world combined. Based on the numbers, we should be winning every single year just based on sheer number of participants, but we don't. And a lot of that, again, not to place any blame, but we had one godfather, so to speak, Bill Pensum, and all he basically preached you have to breed for the champion roller. That is the ultimate specimen you can have. And so for a long time, American rollermen, we were looking for that champion spinner. Even though the competition stated it's a kit competition, team competition, an individual roller, no matter how fast it rolls, it can be, as we say, a blur, a ball that's just spinning so fast you can't see the wings. If it spins by itself, it earns us no points in competition. Yet that was what was preached for a long time. And the difference between American guys and guys in, say, England or even South Africa, they didn't have just one godfather. Like I said, we have here, we just had Pensum for the longest time. We hung on every word that Pensum spoke. And in the UK, they had numerous Pensums. They had numerous guys that flew top-notch rollers, and was the same way in South Africa once they started adopting the World Cup. And so it's taken a long time for us Americans to move away from this predisposition we have for finding just the absolute fastest, deepest individual pigeon.
So the breeding and training practices of the roller pigeon has evolved over the time. What impact has these changes had on the breed and on the competition here in the States and abroad?
Here in the US, what you'll hear a lot of chatter online on these Facebook sites, these roller pigeon sites specifically, is wanting the fastest pigeon. Just like humans, any other animals, there's only so much that the body of the animal, be it, human, dog, pigeon can do. So what we're pushing forward, what we're at least seeing here in the US is we're playing catch up and we're catching up to our European and South African counterparts. We're moving slowly away from breeding individual pigeons, trying to find the fastest, deepest pigeon and trying to find a collective kit of pigeons that will perform like they're supposed to. They said if you look at especially the World Cup, because that's the one that will show how Americans, how we're doing against the rest of the world. I think this year, Brian McCormick, who has been a guest on your show, he placed second, and his birds are, we call them Irish pigeons. They were imported, I believe, in 2011. So they're more recent imports, and the way the birds fly, their mentality, the birds itself, not Brian has a lot to do with it, but I'm saying the birds itself, they work differently than your traditional American, Birmingham Roller. And part of that is because of the way they were bred and selected. Americans as a whole, we're slowly moving towards getting bigger breaks. We call kit sensitivity to get the birds to be more sensitive of their teammates. So when a bird goes, the other bird all go. When I say go, do backflips, perform together. And so we're seeing that's a big change over the past about 5, 6 years now, seeing we're getting larger and larger breaks. And it seems like I know some Americans probably won't like what I'm saying, is we're slowly catching up to our European and South African counterparts.
That's good. As the rules change, that's the trick, right? You got to figure out, you got to know how they score the points. So you want to have a kid of birds that know how to rack up those points.
And going back, you talked about how the breed has changed and with scoring. When the World Cup started, it started in 1991. Back then, there was unofficially a half-second rule, meaning if the birds broke, or when I say break again, roller terminology, when five birds, at least five birds, perform a backflip together, a break. If three went and then half a second later, blink of an eye, two more went, that'd be five. You could count that as five pigeons. Now it has to be instantaneous. So they took out that half-second rule. We used to call waterfalling or popcorn. You see popcorn and three or four birds go, three or four birds go, one right after another. Up until I think it was 2008, a waterfall, guys, not everyone, but it was generally assumed that you could score a waterfall. So if four birds went and two more went right afterwards, it wasn't instantaneous, but you could see it. Two birds went right after the four birds went, you would get 6 points, or most judges would score 6 points. Post 2008 now, it has to be instantaneous. So if four birds go and then two go right after, you get 0 points. That's not a break. You need five minimum. Four went and then two more went. So you have a four-bird break, a two-bird break, no score. And so that's what has changed a lot, is cleaning up the rules, forcing the breeders and the flyers to be more clean with the birds that they select for their flies for the competitions.
So looking forward, what would you say some of the biggest challenges facing the breed and competition is right now, and what kind of steps can be taken to help it?
Yeah, that was something that I pursued during my two stints. Is the old term with my old office was publicity director, and it was, changed now to director of PR, trying to promote the breed. The two biggest, things that are hindering Birmingham rollers, one, definitely the increase of birds of prey, bops, hawks and falcons. You can't blame the birds of prey. Our breed just entices birds of prey because when you do a backflip, they look like a hurt pigeon, right? You imagine a bird doing a backflip to a hawk, to a falcon. It looks like this bird is stumbling from the rest of the flock, the rest of the kit. So they tend to go after those birds. And if you talk to a lot of rollermen, they get upset because when they lose a pigeon, oftentimes it's your best performer, because that performer is the one that's doing the most backflips, going the deepest. So the hawk or falcons will lock in on that particular bird. And so birds of prey is definitely, to me, our largest problem. And the second would be attracting younger fanciers, younger members, younger flyers. But I think that is a problem that is across the board for all pigeon breeds and animal husbandry as a whole.
Yeah, there was an article I read about culpability, basically, where they said if you know you're going to lose so many pigeons and you're breeding not anymore to just breed for a good bird, you're breeding for like predator cessation.
Correct. Yes. It's a double-edged sword because I get the sentiment. I mean, there are guys out in Southern California. I use Southern California a lot because sheer numbers. There's probably more fanciers, more rollermen in just LA County than the rest of the US all combined. So there's a large concentration of rollermen in LA. I know of at least four guys that say they breed 500 or more rollers just so they can end up with 60 birds at the end of the year. So
Wow.
they're breeding hundreds of pigeons. But the bad part is, and they know this too, they understand it, but they feel like if I don't do this, I won't have the numbers. The more you fly and you feed the birds, as we call them, you're giving them a buffet. They can't chase the homers for the most part. Homers tend to get away more often than not. The rollers not so much because they do the backflips. They get targeted and they're slower flyers than homers, and so a lot of the guys, like you said, they're breeding more pigeons because they say, well, I'm going to lose so many, so I need to breed more to keep up. But all you're doing is feeding the birds of prey. And now instead of migrating or going elsewhere, they're going to stay because they know, hey, if I stay here every day at 4 or 5, this guy is going to let out 20 pigeons. And then in another hour, he's going to let out another 20 pigeons. And right down the road, this other guy's letting out 20 pigeons. And it's hard because I can't tell the guys breed less because if they fly the same amount, they're not going to have any birds less. But by breeding more, just keep feeding. You just keep feeding and feeding. These predators, they're going to stay. They're not going to go anywhere. And that's the hard part for a lot of guys is trying to figure out how to prevent, losses to birds of prey.
We're going to be doing an episode. We're going to be talking with a longtime falconer, about some legal deterrents and stuff, what you can do, mix your flight times and stuff.
Yep.
What's the real solution here? Should we start getting, lobbyists, pigeon fanciers get
See,
together?
that's
And
realistically, I mean, the only way change actually happens here, especially here in the States, anywhere else is lobbying. With that comes money. And of course, birds of prey, they're federally protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So there's very little wiggle room around it. Guys have talked about creating a database to show how many birds they've lost to hawks and falcons and sending that to Fish and Wildlife Services. We've talked about trying to keep a database and guys taking pictures of how many birds they lose a year, but at the same time, I don't know how much sympathy you will gain from the policymakers because most guys still, general public, when I say most guys, the general public still look at pigeons as, rats with wings. And like I said, lobbying, if we had the money and we could lobby, that would be the way to go. But realistically, I don't know if we're going to get any public support within the roller group. We've talked about the possibility of trying to, because we don't have money. The roller game, Birmingham Rollers we call it the blue collar poor man's sport. A lot of the guys with money, they fly, if you want performance pigeons, they fly racing homers. There's been talks of trying to form some sort of allegiance with the AU, combat the Hawks and Falcons. Everyone has their own agenda. It's hard. I wish I could say there was a way around it to solve the problem as a whole, but individually, like I said, the only legal way around it is to get a depredation permit, which allows anybody, if you get the permit, it allows you to legally take hawks and or falcons depending on what you've been approved for. So that's the only, and I must say this again to anyone listening, that's the only legal way to take a hawk or a falcon. Shooting it without a permit is illegal, and you're looking at on a minimum of $5,000 to $7,000 fine and prison time, which is not worth it. So anybody out there, if you're looking to take care of your hawk or falcon issue, do it legally. Apply for a federal, they call them take permits, a depredation permit through the U.S. government that supersedes whatever a state law that you have, and that will allow you to take a certain number of hawks and or falcons depending on your location and what the problem bird is.
well, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. I've heard of guys, be like, well, maybe I can just become a falconer and do that. It's like that takes years.
That takes years. Yeah, and yeah, I say, guys, you don't just become one. You have to take you pass the test, and you have to study under a master falconer for at least
That's
a
right. Yeah.
year. So that's the only legal way. That's the only legal way is to apply for. They call it. It's a depredation permit. You can just look it up, a depredation permit, and it's $100. You apply. You tell them, what particular species has been hunting your livestock, your animals. In our case, Birmingham Rollers or racing homers or pigeons, whatever it is that you choose to fly. It's just a 2-page application, front and back. Send pictures if you have pictures of the hawks taking your pigeons. Note how many birds you have lost. I applied for one in 2019 and June of 2019, and I was able to get a depredation permit, and it allowed me to take 4 Cooper's hawk a year. So from June 2019 until June 2020, I was allowed to take 4. I was allowed to trap as many as I wanted. I could legally kill 4. So any other birds that you trap, if once you've taken your 4, any other birds that you trap legally, once you get the permit, one of the game wardens will call and talk to you, and what you do is you have to find a falconer. So I found a falconer in Charlotte. My issue was just Coopers. I had red tails, but the red tails were unsuccessful in hunting. But I did trap a red tail one time. And I called the falconer in Charlotte. We met in the middle. I live in a town called Hickory, and the falconer lived in Charlotte. So we met about 30 minutes away from both of our places in a town called Gastonia. And then I would give him the red tail. And so that's legally the only way to do it. The federal government allows you to take a certain number, and once you get to your limit, legally you have to stop, and then you can contact a falconer who can trap for you, or you can trap, and you must take those birds and give it to the falconer. You cannot take or kill any more than what your permit allows. And then after the 1 year permit is up, you can reapply. I reapplied in May of 2020. It was $100, and just got a letter saying my renewal was denied. They don't give you a reason, but that's what it was.
That seems like it's a practical situation to do right there.
It's the only legal way to do it, but a lot of guys are worried because once you do that, then you open your yard. And I feel like if you're following the law, nothing to worry about you, but you do open your yard up to your local DNR, Federal Game and Wildlife Services to come and take a look at your property if you so choose. You can have the hawk trap laying out in the open. That's completely legal, but a lot of guys just don't feel comfortable with federal agents or your local DNR agents coming in and asking to see your traps or your birds.
Well, it's definitely good information. I appreciate you sharing that. On a lighter note, how about this? How about you tell us you got a favorite story about maybe a competition fly or even a fly at home?
Goodness. Most recently, this past November, about 3 months ago, went to California for a funeral, and it's a bad habit of mine. Anywhere I go, I try to make time for roller pigeons. I had a funeral in Fresno. To make it short, I decided to stay 5 extra days and drive 4 hours up north to go visit the Northern California guys because they were flying in the finals of our National Birmingham Roller Club 20 bird competition. So it was the finals, and Brian McCormick was flying. And for a long time, I had wanted to go see Brian fly in the finals, but it's hard to justify, a five, six, $700 flight, car rental, finding a place to stay, spending $1,300 to go watch a guy fly pigeons. But this time around, I had a funeral, so I'm like, since I'm at the funeral, I'm gonna stay. 5 extra days, drive up north 4 hours to go watch Brian, Daniel, and a few other guys fly. And I saw the most amazing kit I've ever seen. Brian flew. I was a scribe. For those who aren't familiar, a scribe is the guy who writes down the points. There's a judge. The judge will call out the number, say 5, 8, 10, and the scribe's job is to write it down on the score pad. So I was scribing for Brian's kit that ended up winning the national championship, and this is Brian's third national title. So that by far is just being in the games, for as long as I have. I've seen, numerous World Cup champions, national champions. I've seen lots of guys fly from California here to the East Coast and all in between. And the kit that Brian flew, it's just, I knew it was possible because I've seen the points and I've chatted with Brian here and there. But to see it in person, he just had birds that were, like I said, most guys have breaks of, 8, 9, if you're lucky, a couple of, we call them half breaks, 10, 12, 13 bird breaks. Most of Brian's breaks were, we call them half breaks or more, 10 or more pigeons just rolling simultaneously. And it was a sight to see, and it was well worth staying extra. And to me, that was by far the pinnacle of my time in this hobby, watching a kid fly. I've never seen, some guys say, oh, the best kid I've seen was mine in my own backyard. I mean, it's definitely not the case here. The best kid I've ever seen was Brian's kit that he flew in the finals.
Oh, that's cool. And you got to scribe it too. That's really cool to be a part of it.
Yeah, so man, that was fantastic. So, the good thing is the national convention, NBRC 2025 national convention, will be in Sacramento. So that gives the rest of the U.S. and the world who wants to see Brian fly. He's going to fly, assuming he makes it to the finals. He's going to fly during the convention. So
Yeah, that'd be something to see. Well, we're coming up against the clock here. Anybody here in the States that is flying roller pigeons, you guys have a great big national club, lots of resources there. Check out the NBRC's website. They have a lot of information on there, and you can get out there and, you can compete all over with those guys. Too, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing all this great information on what an interesting hobby, what an interesting breed, and what an awesome history, too. Thanks for coming on and talking with us.
yeah, and it's the same too, Philip. Love the podcast. I have listened to every episode except for three. Three of the first three beginning episodes I skipped, and now I have to find time to go back and listen. We're roller men. I'm a roller man, but at the end of the day, I love pigeons. I've had all sorts of pigeons, so I really appreciate the time you've taken to create a podcast like this that isn't just focused on one particular breed. And this allows all of us sometimes to get outside of our own little circle and listen to different fanciers, different men talk about the breeds of their choice. So thank you for your platform and allowing me to come on and talk a bit about the Birmingham Roller Pigeon.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we have with us Rick Schuing. Rick has earned a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Biology from the University of Montana. He spent 28 years as a Montana game warden. He joined the NBRC in 1968 and got his first pigeon at about 5 years of age. Rick has been the regional director on and off for many years. He is a Hall of Fame member, Master Flyer Award winner, and just recently became a Lifetime Achievement Award member, which is double Master Flyer points. Rick has judged the World Cup in 2005, and we're going to talk about roller pigeons and judging the World Cup and all the experiences he's had. So thanks for coming on, Rick.
You bet, Philip. And just clarification, my last name is Shaning, like raining.
Thank you. I apologize about that.
No, it's all right. I've grown up with it.
How do you even become a judge to judge the World Cup?
Well, when I went to England in 1987, I made a pen pal back in the day before social media. They had pen pals, right? And John Huntington read one of my articles I wrote in the American Pigeon Journal and thought I was full of it. So he wrote me a letter and basically told me that, And so anyway, over a couple of years, we become really good pen pals. And he invited me to come to England and show me what real roller pigeons are. And so I did that finally. My wife says, why don't you just go? I grabbed a video camera, old VHS, the one the size of a suitcase, and carried it on my shoulder and did all that. So when I got back, Monty Nebo called me. Monty Nebo was the regional director of, if you will, of the Northwest International Competition. It was really the largest roller fly in the country at the time in North America. Southern California had theirs, but the Pacific Northwest International was probably the most prestigious fly at the time. And so in 1987 or 88, I believe it was, 88, Monty asked me to come and judge it because I just had been over in England. I had never done any judging. And so I showed up over there and I brought my binoculars with me, right? So you're talking a guy in his 20s. I got about laughed out of the yard when I brought my binoculars out. I knew the rules. I read the rules, and in those days, you had to have a half turn or better to even score any points. So you flew 20 birds, and you had to have at least 10 break to even score a point. So needless to say, most guys ended up with a 0. But anyway, so I just knew the rules. I knew what a good roller pigeon was, especially after going to England and watching Bill Barrett and Bob Brown point out pigeons to me and George Mason. I had the confidence. I knew what a really good pigeon was. And so that's what I was looking for in the competition. I just sucked it up and took the criticism about the binoculars. But I think I did a pretty good job for everybody. But Monty Nebo was the guy that hit me up. Good old Monty. And for you folks that have never had the opportunity, the pleasure to meet Monty Nebo, you really missed out. Unfortunately, he was killed in a drunk driving incident in 2000, shortly after he had won the World Cup, along with World Cup judge Heine Weicker, were on the way to the airport. It was a horrible deal. We lost a real master there. But anyway, that's how I got started, Philip. Here you go. After that, I was asked to judge a couple other regions once the NBRC got going. The National Birmingham Roller Club started doing a national fly. The World Cup, I think the World Cup started in 91 was the first year. And so anyway, I ended up judging, I got asked to judge a huge region, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. I mean, my gosh, it was huge. I think it took a couple weeks just driving around to go do that. I gained a lot of experience there and a lot of windshield time with Farrell Bussing. Joe Bell carried me around as well. It was really good experience for me to see pigeons in that part of the country and judge them. But I've always been a real fanatic for quality of roll as opposed to turn scoring. If the pigeons aren't rolling properly, I'm not really impressed with them. But there is a minimum standard that the judge sets in his mind that would be a minimum quality point, barely minimum, but I like a fast pigeon and quality pigeon. And so my eyes always go to those fast quality pigeons. And I have to really discipline myself to actually count the number of birds rolling. So that's one of the difficult things of judging.
So when you were doing all that traveling, just here in the States, you were traveling with other judges?
No, I was the judge.
Oh, okay.
And so it's like, well, here you go. But one of the things, as a game warden, I mean, you're enforcing rules and regulations, right? I understand the fact that you need to understand the rules and regulations that you are enforcing. And so I studied the rules of the competition very well, and I knew them, and I adhere to them. I didn't have any hidden agendas, if you will. I wasn't picking white pigeons over dark checks or whatever. I mean, I followed the rules, and I had very good eyesight at the time. I did anyway. And so anyway, it's just, you learn by doing, Philip. In those days, we scored the pigeons on a break. We allowed for a half-second time. Instead of an instant break, there was a half-second rule, they called it. So the birds, and today it's called a waterfall.
Yeah.
In those days, you were allowed to score that. That's how I got going. I think I judged down in Utah, Idaho a few times. So in 1989, so the Northwest International Roller Fly was the paramount. And so in 1989, Monty allowed me to fly in Montana. And we had a big fly. We included Utah, Boise, Idaho, Montana, and Spokane, Washington, as well as Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, British Columbia. And I ended up taking second place. I won second place in 1989. So I was hooked, man, on this whole competition stuff. The following year, I coordinated and brought in some Englishmen to do it. George Mason and Graham Dexter came and judged that fly in 1990, and it was quite a deal. And so it was after that fly, a couple of guys got together and they ended up forming the World Cup. That's how that started. But I was involved in that right from the get-go. And it all started in the Northwest of North America. And so back to the judging, Philip, I learned by doing, okay? And I'm always in my yard. I was in my yard watching my pigeons fly and judging my pigeons, scoring them. So in 2004, I had a very, very good team of pigeons, and I qualified. I was one of the top kits in my region. I didn't win the World Cup, but the guy that won it, Peter Handy in England, he was unable to judge the following year. And so nominations came out on people who could judge it, get away, and have that much time off. And anyway, I got the nod. I was voted in to judge it. In 2005, I got my boss to give me 8 weeks off. I had to talk to the director of Fish and Game and everything. It was quite the deal, but I had the time, so I was able to do it. But that was a huge experience.
So that was 8 weeks, you said?
8 weeks, yep.
Wow.
There was no break in between. It was nonstop. Ronald Duncan was the coordinator. He's the one that got all the flights and stuff. I had a little bit of a stipend. He bought me a cell phone to use. It didn't work in Europe, so it was worthless. But we figured it out, and I was not abandoned anywhere. I almost did, and when I flew into Holland, my flight was late and I didn't have any contact information for anybody. Go through security and I get off and there's, hundreds of people waiting for their friends and family and nobody's waving their hands at me and I'm like, oh crap. So I just started wandering out of the airport and I look ahead of me and I see a guy wearing a t-shirt with a Crystal Palace roller on the back, 521. Bill Penson's Crystal Palace roller.
Nice.
So I run up. And lo and behold, that's who was supposed to pick me up. But it was close. I almost was stranded there in Holland.
That guy picked the right outfit.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I tell you what, seeing the pigeons being flown all over the world was reassuring. As soon as I got home, I hugged my pigeons. I was really nice to see that. Heine Biker in Holland flew a phenomenal team of pigeons. So did one of his fellow club members who had also qualified, Henk Nijman, or Nijman, however he pronounces it. Those pigeons had teamwork like I hadn't really seen before. When you get 3/4 of the birds breaking together, I was dumbfounded. And so anyway, I was just blown away with it. South Africa, oh my gosh. There's a country that was fairly new to kit competition.
Mm-hmm.
And so those guys just asked me question after question after question. It was just, I told them everything I thought I knew, here's what to try and here's what's working here in North America. But one of the things that when I was in England, Graham Dexter was carrying me around. Graham Dexter is a great roller man, and he's done a lot of organizing of things and put together their actual national club, the National Birmingham Roller Association. He was involved with that for many, many years. And so I'll never forget. So we're there in the Middlesbrough area. I hop in a vehicle to go to another loft, and the guy driving the vehicle turns around and looks at me and he goes, "You're doing it all wrong." And I'm like, oh, great. So here's a top flyer in England telling me I'm doing it all wrong. And I'm like, well, really, and then Graham Dexter, being the statesman and diplomat, he's trying to settle this old flyer down. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. Because England judges their pigeons differently and than we do. The way their rules are different. And so this guy was not real familiar with how we did it. And so at that time in 2005, we were still using the half-second rule. And so what he was frustrated about is that I was scoring breaks that should have not have been scored because you had 4 birds start and then 5 more go with them half second. I was scoring them because they wouldn't have scored them at all. It was quite, what do you do with that? Somebody tells you that. You suck it up and you say, well, I'm going to be consistent. This is the way I've been judging right from the get-go, and that's the way I'm going, and that's what the rules said.
Yeah.
But Graham was really good. He settled the guy down.
How many different countries did you go to during that stretch of judging?
Well, all of North America, Canada, England, Holland, Denmark, South Africa, Australia, stop over in Hawaii on the way back. Ireland wasn't part of the thing then, either was the Baltic states, which are all involved now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but that was it.
Was anybody's loft setups kind of dramatically different than anybody else?
Well, yeah, the guys in South Africa, granted, I was all around Johannesburg area, and I was there in their winter.
Okay.
So at night, it gets right around freezing. Their lofts were all very open, like your friends there in Arizona, down on the valley floors. They're all metal dowel rods. They obviously don't have snakes down there that would get in there, but everything was real open. I was really surprised. They're beautiful lofts, they all had sliding doors and stuff. And some of the guys even had their own loft managers that scraped every day for them. But as far as the most of the lofts in England have that real similar, especially in the Middlesbrough area, where they have one building and then you walk, there's a big main door, and then there's a common area where they will feed the pigeons after they fly. And then they have their kit boxes up against the wall, and they just open a section and the birds, they tap on the floor and they fly into their perch, that type of thing. And that's real common in England. But in Denmark and Holland, they were all a little different. But the guys in England all had real similar, especially in the Middlesbrough area. There's probably a lot of guys in England had landing towers for the birds because they live in those little row house areas where there's not much of a backyard. They call it a back garden. So it's all brick and concrete. If the bird screws up and rolls coming into land, he's dead.
Oh, right.
He's going to hit a solid object. And so it was interesting to see the landing towers there. I've never used them. Monty Nebo had them over up at his loft there in British Columbia. He swore by them. But a funny story, when I got to South Africa, the previous judge that I had followed had some problems in South Africa. They weren't happy with him. And so I was kind of instructed by the executive committee to really be a diplomat. So I get to one house to stay there, and that's the nice thing about it. Almost 95% of the places I went to, Philip, they put me up in their house. So you meet the family, you eat their food. It's the way to travel, my gosh. So I get to the one guy's place, and we're doing what they in South Africa. So a barbecue there is called a braai, a B-R-I-E, a braai. And so we're having a braai out there eating eating wild antelope, and whatever else the guys killed. And this one fellow had a really beautiful blonde wife. And he came up to me and he says, and he told me about the guy that was there before me, and he wasn't real happy with the guy. And he says, yeah, I told him, he says, I want you to sleep with my wife. And the guy goes, well, why is that? Because I want to beat the living hell out of you. He says, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. So this is you're all by yourself, man. You're on a foreign country, you're on the other end of the equator,
Right.
So you just have to be a straight shooter. And I survived very well. But I'll never forget that. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, that previous fellow had some trouble. So, but that's part of judging. Like right now, I'm a judge. I'm a justice of the peace. I put people in jail. I sentence them. But you got to know the law. You got to follow the law. That's what I've been pretty good at throughout my whole life, is interpreting the rules and laws and stuff. And so being able to explain it, like as a game warden, my gosh, talking about complicated regulations, go fishing in Montana. The book's about half-inch thick. So I mean, I got a knack for it, I guess, Phil.
Yeah.
And so I survived very well. But I'll tell you what, after judging that World Cup, I think I did a couple more other big events. But then I'd rather not judge anymore. I like to go into competitions, and I like to watch those teams and pick out the phenomenal pigeons that are ripping in there. Not so much counting, well, that was an 11 bird break or whatever. I want to say, oh, look at that blue bar. Oh. That's what does it for me. So I haven't really been a big advocate of wanting to go judge anymore. I find it interesting. Some of these guys that I have in my yard that are judging, they can count, they can look up and say, yeah, you got 19 pigeons up there. They can spot immediately. I can't do that. I got to count in groups of 3s or 4s at the most. If they're moving around, I'm like, oh crap. Okay, and those, some guys can do it. I don't have that ability. The judging, it's a job. That's one thing I noticed. I remember when I judged the World Cup. I'm not a real fan of flying. At least I wasn't. But there's no question you had to get on the plane, And so I finally got over the fear of flying. It's like getting on the bus. And then when I get to a loft, meet the guy, put up your team. It was a job. It wasn't really fun, if you will. It wasn't a visit. It was a job.
Right.
And so when the judge comes to your loft, he's got a job to do. You, as the competitor, need to understand that and appreciate the fact that he's given up family time with his birds to go and judge you.
That's right.
It's a huge commitment, and we are indebted big time to these guys willing to do that. It's important that the people that you do select as a judge has some experience in good pigeons, like the way the World Cup is, if you win it, and a guy can win it out of the just luck out, have the perfect weather, have the perfect day, and he could win it.
That's right. Yeah.
Maybe he hasn't won much before, but he may not be the best judge, and so we've had some issues, especially in the World Cup, where not the best people are around judging. They may know how to fly birds in their yard, but they don't know the rules or whatever. I can remember being in California judging the World Cup in Southern California, and I'll never forget, Jerry Higgins was a great master down there, former law enforcement officer. He got shot in the job. And anyway, so I'm judging this kit, and he yells out, "Finally, somebody judging by the rules." I'll never forget that. I looked at him, I'm like, well, what's the deal? He goes, just good job, keep it up, and so that was also, some good things to hear from guys like Jerry Higgins.
Yeah. What would you say the most difficult thing about judging roller pigeons is?
Well, for me personally, is to focus on counting the birds that are rolling properly in the break.
Yeah.
And keeping my eyes focused on that instead of going to the really fast pigeon that blew me away.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I really have to discipline myself. But now, granted, you get a big break. A guy's got 20 pigeons up there, and you get a massive break. You're not going to be able to count 15 pigeons. But what you can do is count how many are left.
There you go. Yeah.
There's 5 birds left, or if they are farting around, you can call it a 15 bird break. But realistically, you weren't able to count 15 pigeons rolling properly to your standard, dropping the adequate depth. So it's so subjective. Like we had a guy just judge the World Cup this last time, good friend of mine, Brian Krog. Everybody was giving him hell. I said, boy, them Canadians can't count past 9. Because he wasn't awarding many big breaks. But Brian's real analytical, and he's like, I want to be able to see them pigeons start the roll and finish the roll and make sure they come out properly. He really was analytical about it. And so much that, people were joking about it. Yeah, those Canadians can't count past 9. But when he did finally see a couple top teams, by golly, he did count past 9. But when I was in Carolinas at Clay Hoyle, who's a Lifetime Achievement Award winner, a great flyer, after I judged his team, he looked at me and he says, "Boy, you judge pigeons just like Monty Nebel." And that to me was a huge compliment, because Monty Nebel was the guy that got me started judging. That's one of the difficult things, Philip, is that you got to just judge your gut instinct, what you see in that break. There's enough pigeons doing it properly. And they're doing it, there's no wing changing, there's nobody faking it, falling through because a lot of times they go through the motions, they're kit mates, and maybe only half of them are actually rolling properly. It's a tough call, but you got to stick with it and you got to be consistent in how you call things. You can't get swayed by big names. Like some judges will get swayed by big names. It's terrible, but they just do. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm judging so and so. He's won the world, cup 3 times or whatever. Or he's a
Right, yeah.
Hall of Fame member. My gosh, I read all his articles and I agree with them. And so you got to get over that as a judge. But we as competitors, like been a regional director many years for the World Cup in my area. I did coordinate the World Cup in 2010, the whole thing.
Well,
So I know what it takes to get a judge around, but we are indebted for these people that are willing to do that and step up and do judge. Like in South Africa, those guys are so dedicated. They want South Africa to win. Whereas in, United States, I want to win. Me. Down there, it's South Africa. And so they have seminars on how to judge. They're just like a totally different level than we are in the United States. Now, granted, most of them are really close together within 100 miles, probably 150 miles most. All those flyers around Johannesburg in Pretoria. And so they can get together and do these big training situations and share birds amongst themselves. And, in England's kind of the same way as well. I mean, they do share their birds a lot in England. I'll never forget when I was interviewing George Mason back in 1987. We were talking about champion rollers. He said, well, I got one champion, but it's loaned out, So here's the best
oh,
pigeon he
wow.
has. He's got it loaned out. That doesn't happen in the United States very often. Guys in England, they share their birds. So that's why they fly top pigeons over there as a group, and same with South Africa now. They want to win at all costs and their country to win. Whereas I think in England, maybe it's a little more individual, as in South Africa is. I guess we digressed a little bit where I was going with that. But the training and educating of judges, everybody says, oh, we need to have a judging seminar. We have to certify judges. Well, how the heck are you going to do that? Logistically, it's tough. And if you take a video of a good kit and you try to educate people off that video, I've yet to see a good video showing what pigeons are really doing. It's such an optical illusion when these pigeons are rolling. The videos just destroy it.
Especially on a video, you're going to miss so much.
Yeah. Yeah, and so now, granted, maybe you could use it to say, okay, these pigeons, we've agreed that these pigeons appear to be rolling properly. Okay, so how many you got there? You got 11. Well, you got a video. You can count them. You can stop it. So I just don't see how it's ever going to be done. And so as an RD, regional director, what I have done is I have looked for people. In Montana, it's hard to get people we always joke, you can't get there from here, airports wise. Now, granted, our World Cup region includes Boise, Idaho. Used to have Salt Lake City, but they got to a point where they didn't want to fly against us, I think, and they flushed us. And so Boise, Idaho, and us. And so I try to pick a judge that lives near an airport that is economically feasible to fly into Boise, Idaho, or in Montana.
Smart.
Yeah, but not all of them have judging experience. But you look at them and you know what kind of pigeons they fly. You quiz them and you just hope for the best. You tell them to read the rules. And as long as you're consistent, that's a biggie. Is consistency when you're judging. If you call a breaks this way, well, then call them all that way.
Right.
The quality multipliers are something that varies quite a bit. They go from 1.0, which is the minimum, to a phenomenal 2.0. And so everybody's 1.5 or 1.6 is a little different. I thought it was pretty interesting. In 2019, I had a heck of a team and ended up third in the world that year and fourth in the national that year with that same team. And during the regional in the World Cup, John Vandenbroek, a very, very well-known flyer out of California, he scored my pigeons. He gave me a 1.6 for quality and 1.8 for depth. And so I qualified for the World Cup. And so when Graham Dexter, an Englishman, came over and judged me, he gave me the exact same qualifier, 1.6 for quality and 1.8 for depth, which I thought was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
That they scored them the same quality points and depth points. Like for me, when I was judging the World Cup, if a pigeon met my standard as a Birmingham Roller, I would give it a 1.5. And so like people were saying, well, what's a 1.0? And I said, well, basically a fast tumbler. And I only gave out a couple of those. And I remember one guy was in Canada, the RD that was carrying me around when I judged this man's team who put me up and fed me. And his pigeons were slow and they were short. And I scored them. I gave him a 1.0, 1.0. 1.0 for depth, 1.0 for quality. And that guy was like, well, those are just tumblers. I'm like, well, guess what? I'm the judge. I'm scoring them. I'm like, how did he win your region with these pigeons? Obviously, there's no good pigeons up here, is what you're telling me, buddy. So there is a minimum, and some guys are like, well, minimum should be a perfect H pattern, smooth rolling pigeon. I'm like, well, okay. And then throw out the 2.0, you'll never get there. You won't even get to a 1.5. Another difficult thing in judging is so when you award those quality and depth points, you can only award it on the breaks that are scored. So those pigeons that you're scoring, say those 9 or 10 pigeons you scored in that break, you have to, in your mind, say, okay, their quality was a 1.6 and the depth was a 1.2 or whatever, and then they break again. You gotta keep that in mind. There may be some 2.0 quality pigeons in there. The birds in the break aren't all like that. And so you got to give those quality and depth points to the actual break that you score. And so it's the overall average. And that's really hard for a lot of judges to do. And it only comes from doing it. You learn by doing it. But yeah, anyway, we are indebted to anybody that is willing to step up and judge, and we're willing to let them try. Well, especially in the regional competitions. A lot of regions will actually panel judge, and we've had to do that a few times here in Montana. And the panel judging works because everybody learns how tough it is to judge, and you throw out the high score and the low score and you average them.
It's not a bad way of doing it right there, though.
No, it's not. But a lot of the whole part of the competition, like in Montana, we compete twice a year. The World Cup and then the national. And so here's our only opportunity to bring in people from out of the area. So we want to bring a judge in just to meet them and show them our setup and let them see Montana, take them fishing, whatever, or duck hunting. Like we did one year. He wanted a greenhead really bad, so we got him a greenhead. So that's a big part of the competition is to bring another flyer in from another part of the country to show him what you guys have here, Whereas panel judging, you don't get that. We all know who's got the best birds in our region usually. Like, well, yeah, so-and-so is going to win it again, the son of a gun, Whereas you bring a judge in from another part of the country, he doesn't know. And so he gets to see everybody and be more straightforward, I think. So anyway, judging is a big thing. There's no real set standard. If you don't like the judge, don't ask him back the next year. That's how it works. You just don't beat him up, just say, well, I didn't like the way he judged. Okay, well, we won't use them again, So anyway, that's about judging. It's a big thing and critical with our sport.
Is there any message or advice that you'd like to give out to all the roller flyers out there?
Well, first of all, yeah, you new guys that are out there, and the very few that we do get, you definitely need to get around and see how other people do it. I learned so much. When I went to England the first time in 1987, like I said, it was like going to graduate school. It was like, oh my gosh, all the things you read about, all the things you thought you knew by going around and seeing these top flyers. Then you went home and went, well, gosh, I was way wrong about that. Or yes, maybe I was right about that. I knew that all along, and so by going around and visiting flyers is just critical thing to do. You don't stay in your backyard. You don't. If you really want to excel, pick pigeons on their performance in the air. Don't pick pigeons on their color or their pedigree or who you got them from. Pick them on their performance in the air. That's a huge thing. Like this family of pigeons I've been working on 40 years. And I was showing a guy, Gabe Glenn, he couldn't believe it. I said, well, there hasn't been a pigeon in the last 40 years that entered my stock loft that didn't roll properly. And he's like, what? And I said, yeah, they all roll properly or else they didn't make it in the stock loft. That's something that you as a new flyer don't just take pigeons from so-and-so and hope to get good ones. You got to pick them out of the air. So those are a couple things that people need to realize. And it's not easy. George Mason made a comment, it takes 2 lifetimes to learn this hobby. I agree with him. I've been doing it. I'm 67 and I've had roller pigeons since I was 9 years old, all pure rollers since I was 9. So I still don't know what the heck I'm doing sometimes. Yeah, but that's what makes it so fun. It's a challenging sport that we do. You can have the best kit in the world, but if the weather screws you, you're done. It's just things that got to line up. Like Brian McCormick said, he said the The stars were right. They
Yeah.
lined up, I had them everything going into it and the stars lined up and it was perfect. I'm still waiting for one of those days.
Well, hopefully it comes on a day you got a judge out there.
Well, yeah, no kidding. Oh yeah, we've all had days where we just walk away and go, "Oh my God, where was Bill?" Or I needed somebody here just to witness this because no one will believe us. But anyway, those are some things, Phil, that people need to worry about. And if you're in an area where have other flyers, those are the guys you need to get the pigeons from your flyers in your area, because those birds are accustomed to that weather
Oh yeah.
conditions. It makes a difference. So, but it's just, man, it's such a fascinating sport. That's all I
It
can say,
is.
Bobby, and it really is. We're not breeding for feather length, head shape. We're breeding for this innate motor to spin in the proper body to give them that ability to get the most out of that motor in their head, and by seeing it by at other places and watch how other guys fly their birds, that's how the new guys are going to learn. And other than that, there's not much else I can tell you. But get involved. Don't be afraid to reach out to big names that are competitive. Most guys like to mentor people, share their birds. I think it's something you need to do. Don't be afraid to reach out.
All good advice, and it's simple enough to follow too. Very practical.
Yep. I personally like a variety of colors in my pigeons, and so I specifically keep that going. But I've gone to some lofts where they're all dark checks or all blue bars, whatever. Like Monty Nebel, he wanted his pigeons to look like birds underneath the bridges. So everybody's got their personal likes and dislikes. I think a guy needs variety in your family, variety of colors. It's something to keep in mind. Like George Mason told me way back, he said he always breeds a blue to a red. Don't ask me why. I always do. Light to dark. He always clashes the colors. And so I think that's good advice, and it was really funny, Phil. I don't know how much time we got, but when I was in England, they would just tell you, well, the old time fanciers would do it this way. And then they wouldn't explain why they did it that way, other than, well, that's what Ken Payne did. That's what Elijah Tompkins did. That's just what you do. The old time fanciers did this. And I thought it was interesting, as a biologist training, and I always wanted, well, wait a minute, why? Why did the birds do that? Why? No, that's just what you did. The old time fanciers did it this way. If you got a mentor that does it a certain way, if you want to win, do what he says. Don't question maybe why he does it. You may not get the answer you're looking for.
That's good, especially a mentor. Especially in
Oh yeah,
the
yeah,
competitive side of things. Having a mentor be tremendously helpful for new
yeah. See,
flyers.
and that was I never had one, and so it was all having to learn on my own, reading, and so I was always questioning, am I doing it right? And then when I did that trip to England, it was like, oh my gosh, I was on a lot of areas, and in a lot of areas I wasn't. And but feeding, you got to master feeding. That's one of the things I came back from England, put that to work in my pigeons. And within a couple of weeks, I had a mediocre team doing very, very well, just based on feeding. And I had never even knew to do that. And so there's a lot to be said for feeding management in your birds, getting them ready, how to bring them up, how to break them down,
Oh right, yeah.
how to mess with their psyche. Because this rolling behavior is not a normal behavior for an animal. You can't like racing pigeons, it's totally different, And with the rollers, there's methods of manipulating feed and the kinds of feed,
Hmm.
change of feed, just something you do differently that will trigger the roll reflex. Feeding's huge, and you learn that by doing. But if you have a mentor, they can say, "Hey, look, try this. This works on these birds. This is how I do it. Try it. Try it. So all you can do is try it. You got a lifetime to try it. You'll never master it. I've got my master flyer points because I've been doing it since 1990. That's how I got the points. I've never won the big one. Closest I came was third in the World Cup. They just were a good team.
Maybe we should do a future episode on feeding, because there's a lot of the yo-yo method and all the different techniques that guys
Oh,
use and
yeah.
do, and
Yeah. And there's something to be said there with families.
right.
Like my birds, I've selected this family over the years to live on red wheat, because that's what was the cheapest grain around here that I could get my hands on. Working for the government all these years, I didn't make a lot of money, typical, government employee. And so they learned to live on red wheat flyers. I've always fed good feed for my breeders. Some of these families You got to feed the hell out of them to keep them in the air. Whereas mine, you give them too much feed, they'll fly for a couple, 3 hours, up high. And so there are different metabolisms in these different families of roller pigeons, and I think Brian McCormick was telling a friend of mine, Rich Hayes, that those Irish birds he flies, you got to feed them a ration and a half compared to the other birds. They're that different. They have different metabolisms. The only way you learn is by trying to manipulate them with feed. You just can't say, okay, I'm feeding them this mix from this grain company, try it, be different. Like I mix my own. In Montana, you don't have just a pigeon feed place. You can go buy pigeon feed. You got to mix it. They all grow it around here, you got to mix it.
Find that blend that works.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'd be glad to visit about that another time, Phil.
I think that'd be a really good one because it comes up all the time with roller guys. So that'd be really interesting to go down that one.
Try different things and like Brian McCormick says, this pigeons roll the food in their crop, this last one. They had the food in their crop. So I think Joe Rowe, when he won the World Cup, they were puking up peas when they landed. They were full of peas, So there's just all these things that you can do to get the best out of those pigeons. And depending on the family that you've developed or the family that you've got your hands on, it's different.
This has been great. I really appreciate you coming in and talking with us about your experiences.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
thanks for coming on and talking with us and sharing all that.
You bet, Phil. Same here. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we have with us Gabe Glenn. Gabe was introduced to pigeons around the age of 9 years old. He is a co-founder and the president of the All Ohio Roller Club. Here's a list of some of the bigger wins he has achieved. 2021 Regional NBRC Fly, second in the 11 bird, third in the 20 bird. 2022 NBRC Regional 11 bird, first and second. 2022 NBRC National Final 11 bird, first and third, winning the national win, the highest recorded score in the history of 702 points. 2023 AORC All Ohio Fly, first place. 2023 NBRC Regional 11 bird, first place. 2024 World Cup Regional Fly, second place. 2024 World Cup Final, third in North America and 13th overall. 2024 AORC All Ohio Fly, third place. Just a couple of weeks ago, he won the NBRC Regional Fly and the NBRC National 11 Bird Fly for the second time. Today we're going to talk about pairing up rollers for the breeding season that we're all starting right now. So thanks for coming on and talking with us, Gabe.
Hey, my pleasure. Glad to be on here.
So let's talk about this most recent fly that I guess it was back in October, you said, but let's talk about that and what the weather was like and conditions with your birds.
Going into the fly, we have more BOP pressure toward the fall. In my preparation, I was getting, just random falcon and hawk attacks and stuff. And it was almost to the point where it's throwing me off. I was having to hold the birds back a little more than what I felt comfortable doing. And I had to keep a tighter leash on them, watch those fly times and stuff like that. I was able to get a window the last week in preparation and fly the birds a few times and kind of dial them in and see what birds were really working for me and put a kit together. On the actual finals day, the barometric pressure was really high. It was like the highest I'd ever seen. It was like 30.53. That affects rollers in many ways. Like for mine, when the pressure's real high, they're kind of reluctant to come out of the box. And when they do, they won't fly necessarily as good as they usually do. And a lot of times they'll sky out and a lot of people have problems with overflies. But on this particular kit, I'd really kept an eye on them and they were really dependable all the way through. I felt like they were as good of a kit as I've ever had. The last kit that won a national championship in 22, they were, just really consistent, good working birds. And that's what I had going into this fly. So I was confident in one hand, but kind of nervous about how the pressure was going to affect them. And I turned them loose and it seemed like they had no problem with it whatsoever. They went up and immediately got to work, stayed busy the whole time and flew ideal height, ideal pattern. And just watching it that day, I knew that, that was going to be tough to beat. From that point on, from October to December, I had to sit and just watch every day as other kits were being judged and see if I could hang on to that top spot. Lucky enough I did. So it was a great day. Wasn't too hot. I believe the temperature was probably in the mid 70s, flew in the evening. And so everything just kind of fell together and worked out. That's a lot to roller flying. You know, you can have everything going good for you, but a little bit of bad luck can throw you off. And so I kind of finished up with some good luck, and it worked out.
Is that a pretty average fly for your birds that day, or were they kind of above their normal level?
Oh, they were definitely like, like a 10 of 10, and that, like an average day. You know, I breed birds that, have pretty good performance consistently, but I don't keep my kit birds in the condition where they can do, that ultimate performance. I kind of, what I refer to as like keep them deconditioned, where they're not really in the physical stamina to really work as hard as they want to. And, so I'll just fly them like, maybe twice a week, or kind of give them some days off where they're staying freshened up. They're not wore out. And more toward a fly, I'll fly them a little bit more and just let them build that stamina up just a little bit more to where they're almost to the point where they're getting wore out. And then it's those crucial days of rest before the fly where they recover, but they've still got all that built-in stamina where they can put on a better performance. And for me, it's a lot about flying them enough to where they've got the physical endurance, stamina to do what they want to do. They're a little lighter in body condition, and it seems like that helps them roll a little faster, a little deeper, just kind of giving them some rest and good feed and letting it kind of go through and digest and turning them out and hoping for the best. So yeah, I'd like to have a performance like that. It's kind of like a setup deal. It's not average. You're kind of wanting every bird to be at its total peak, and you can't really maintain that physical peak too much in rollers because they'll start losing like a mental peak. If you keep them physically where they can roll that much and that hard for that long, for too long of a period, it seems like they kind of might lose the desire to do it. And so you kind of got to time it up where they hit like a mental peak and a physical peak. When I flew them that day, I felt like they nailed it. It was as good as they could have done, and I was very tickled.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you definitely do a lot of things to kind of build up to that point for that specific day and time. Congratulations on that win, especially a second-time champion for that. That's pretty impressive.
It feels unreal. I look up to guys that do good in these flies and win these championships and stuff, and I don't know. I still can't really put myself in that category. So it just doesn't feel real at this point.
The All Ohio Roller Club has hosted the NBRC convention here recently, and I wanted to follow back up with you and see how that all came out.
The convention, it went great. It was a good weekend of just being around a lot of guys with the same interest. I don't think you could take any other group of people that are in the same hobby and put them together and have that many good people in one spot. I mean, just everybody, just top notch, just good people. You're always in good company. At the time, it really never dawned on me till after it was over. Everybody that was there was as into roller pigeons as I was. And so that kind of took a while to sink in. You think it'd be like common sense or whatever that it would be like that. But honestly, I'm so used to being in situations where I'm, a little bit above and beyond your average guy in pigeons. So, I'm head over heels in them. And well, heck, by the time it was all said and done, I was like, man, these guys are ate up with these things just as bad as I am. And that's pretty neat. I think that's one thing, going to these conventions, it's just a real good experience to be with a lot of people that are doing extra for the hobby. They're top-notch flyers, top-notch competitors, contributors to the hobby. It really took, after it was over, me looking back on it to realize just how, everybody was there. And it was really great. As far as, my birds on the convention, I was a little nervous about it. It was, there's a lot of people in the yard, and I was hoping they do good. But, I had that group core that won the 11 bird, they were in there, and there was about another kit that was, kind of up there in that potential as well. And they're just consistent birds with a decent work rate. And so I kind of knew they wouldn't let me down, but, I was still kind of nervous. We got to my house about noon. It was in the 90s. Sometimes that can throw them off, but I turned them loose and they didn't let me down. They went up and, they worked like probably better than I would have hoped. They did good. They made me proud. I was smiling as I was feeding them, bringing them back in. I was like, thank you guys for not letting me down.
Nice. Was it pretty well attended? A lot of people show up for the convention.
Yeah, there's, people in and out. So there's like some people there on the first days and that weren't able to be there in the last, and some in the last weren't there in the beginning. But I think overall there's generally around 150 people or so on the bus, going around. It was quite a few people.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good turnout.
Yeah, I think it was, I think typical attendance is like 100 to 150. And so this was one of the ones where there's just kind of the maximum number they will typically get. So a lot of people.
Whatever it is, whether you're a roller guy, racer guy, fancy pigeon guy, it's like you say, you're always kind of in the general day-to-day stuff, you might be like the pigeon guy in the group of friends and go to a convention, whatever the convention is, and then all of a sudden all those pigeon people all in one place all have that same drive and passion, and it's a really special thing, a really cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, because I think, most events and most time I've been around rollers, there's new guys and guys that have been in it a while, but, aren't real serious. And then there's guys like me. Well, man, at that convention, it was a whole bunch of guys, just as serious about it as I am. So that was really neat.
Congratulations for your club and everything. Shout out to the All Ohio Roller Club, for hosting that. That takes a lot of work. And obviously you guys had a good turnout. So congratulations on the success with that. That's great.
It was kind of an example of job like that shared isn't that hard on any particular person. And, when it came down to it, they're just everybody was there willing to do their part. Everything went smooth. Big shout out for me, would be to Danny Sturgeon and Dan Galarza. Those guys they just do so much for our national club. Their experience in putting these conventions together and lining them out made it pretty easy for us. Everything was kind of delegated and we had our jobs to do. And so we did our little parts and they coordinated the whole thing and it went really smooth.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit and get into the meat and potatoes of this one here. It's coming up at the end of December right now, so we're going to start looking at pairing up birds for the breeding season. And let's talk about some of the methods that you do right now. Have you started your pairing up process yet?
Yeah, I've actually banded 21 babies so far.
Oh, you started a while ago then.
Yeah, I got to jump on it. I got antsy.
Okay. When do you usually start your breeding season then?
I usually start, mid-February. I started in December a couple years ago, and the birds I raised from that contributed more to my fly season same year. I kind of wanted to give it a try this year. At the time, it's, starting this early, it can be like 2 steps forward and 1 step back because cold stress on the birds is an added stress that, they require more feed. It's a little harder on them. And you have slightly higher mortality rates. If an egg gets knocked out of the nest or a chick gets knocked out of the nest and it's in the teens, it's not going to work out. But a lot of times in summer, you can kind of catch it and you don't have those losses. So you lose a little bit more, but you get a quicker benefit. And so that's kind of what I was hoping to do, try to get my breeding season started again earlier this year so I can quit it earlier and focus more in the competition season on flying birds rather than raising birds and flying competition at the same time.
Is there a certain number of babies that you hatch out and then you're done? Are you trying to get to a certain number, then that's when you separate again?
Yeah, I mean, I try to raise more birds than what I need, just so that way there's always people, wanting pigeons. If I only raise birds for myself, I'm not able to help people out. And, growing up in these birds, I mean, I've appreciated everybody that's helped me out. So I definitely probably one of the most satisfying things from this hobby for me is being able to help guys out like I've been helped out in the past, kind of pay it forward type thing. So
yeah.
So I try to raise extra birds. I don't want it to become like a job for me where it burns me out. I mean, if I can just keep cranking out babies and flying birds and, and I'm enjoying it, I'm just going to keep going. But typically I'll try to raise, over 100. And once I get up to 200, that's too much. So probably like an ideal number would be 150. I don't need that many, probably, 50 of those, be given away, instantly. And, I'll kind of mess with that 100 and, go from there.
When do you end the breeding season?
I don't really have much anything set in stone. I just kind of push the breeders as hard as I can go. When I see them start looking more wore out, they need rest or they're wanting to start mold, I'll split them up. I mean, some guys will only raise 3 rounds out of pigeons. I'll raise 5 or 6. I've raised up to 10 rounds actually, or more in a year out of a pair, natural, not fostering and stuff. But I give birds, supplements and kind of keep an eye on them. I don't really have any problems losing birds or burning birds out, so I just keep going. I kind of go by them. If they kind of look like they're becoming uninterested in breeding or it's too much for them, I'll split them up. But if hens keep laying and they keep raising, I'll let them go. But so I know that's kind of not really a good, clear answer to your question. But so this year, I'm hoping to have everything stopped by probably April or May.
Okay.
So I'll get, December round, January, February, March, and April, and hopefully shut it down by May.
Do you have nest boxes and you control who's pairing up with who?
I actually do open loft. I like the benefits as far as how much easier it is to maintain. That's the biggest, the other benefit. It's kind of like they feed off of each other. They kind of gain momentum. So cocks will start, they'll start pairing up. They'll driving hens together. It's more of like a natural atmosphere, to keep them going. And it just seems like they enjoy it better. I've been individual breeders and they just, I don't know, in a way they just kind of, seem like they're in a prison cell together. Where in an open loft, I mean, it just seems more natural, like they enjoy it. And I think just by that, their eagerness to breed and kind of working as a group to be stimulated to breed, I think it's just, you can get a little bit more production that way out of them.
At any point, do you pair any up individually for if you got your favorite hen and your favorite cock, or you just, you let them all go?
I definitely control what mates go together in a sense. I think that genetically, I don't want like real tight breeding like a father daughter, mother son. I kind of like to stay around like the cousins, distantly related. I'll take a certain line of cocks. They might be like a few brothers and then some hens that would be compatible to those genetically, and I'll just kind of let them pick how they want to mate. I do it in sets like that till everybody's kind of made it up pretty much the way I wanted it. But I do give them options because I feel like you can pair birds up that aren't compatible, and I think birds that aren't compatible aren't as productive. And two, I think that pigeons, if you give them a little bit of a choice, I think they can pick a better mate than a pair of my birds can pick better mates than what I could probably pick for them. So in a sense, I give them a little bit of freedom, but I'm also controlling the genetics and how they made up. And then, I mark down, I keep good notes of who's paired with who and keep an eye on all that.
Yeah, we spoke with Frank McLaughlin. He's a racer guy, and he was talking about the benefits of open loft breeding. And he kind of said the same thing about they're going to find who they're compatible with, even genetically, maybe. They're going to find that on their own.
Yeah.
One of the benefits of having an open loft is that, and they'll probably feed better, take care of their babies better, everything else. So
yeah, I definitely agree 100% with that. And two, like, when I first got into this, I didn't really know how to pair them up, what direction to go. To me, I felt like you're always better to, instead of try to show your pigeons how to do things, like let them kind of do things and then sit back and observe what works and what doesn't. By giving them freedom, some of them have bred like in ways that I would feel like traditionally wouldn't be compatible, but it actually produced some of the better birds. Like in rollers, some guys, will go a short pigeon to a deep pigeon, a big pigeon to a small pigeon. It's like they're always trying to balance everything out. I gave my birds enough, selection where they could choose, and a lot of times they wouldn't balance each other out. I had two shorter rollers mating up, two bigger ones, a lot of stuff like that. I kind of thought that it might not work out, but it turns out it did. I definitely have learned a lot from those birds, and just by kind of letting them do their thing and just watching them and keeping notes, keeping track of percentages, from production to how good a percentages of rollers they put into my A team.
do you have more than one type of family in your loft?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've got predominantly hays and hardesty birds. The hays were really tight. They're pretty much a true family. The hardesty's kind of a little bit open. There was some other stuff added into those birds. And then my hardesties come from a couple different sources. I've got a couple really good Turner birds that have produced really well for me. I had some birds imported from Darren Deacon in England, and I've got those as well. So I'm always trying to, work different families. Basically, it's like employees. If something's got a really good resume, where it's like winning a lot or, really proven, I want to, hire that family of pigeons to come in here and work. And, if they work out and they add to what I've got, then great. But if they don't, then I just move on.
And you'll let all these different families all breed together?
Not necessarily. Like initially, I like to breed them straight, but I'm not going to take a lesser pigeon in because of what family it is and breed from it just to keep them pure. Those Darren Deacon birds, when I had them imported, by the time I got them, I ended up with more hens than cocks. So I've got, this is the first year breeding them. I don't really like doing it the first year, but it was either not breed those pigeons or breed them into my stuff. So they're crossed on the cocks that I've flown out. I think once you fly roller pigeons, I think if they're compatible in the air, if they kit together, they work together, you can feed them and they handle together. You can feed them the same, and you don't have birds flying too long or flying too high or landing early. If they go up and they just simply go up and fly your 45 minutes and work and come down, I think if they do that, then they're compatible breeding wise. the big thing is they can kind of hit that peak, like I was talking about when I flew on the championship this year. They kind of, all the birds hit that peak at the same time. They're all in this inline shape where they were physically all able to do the best they could do on that day. So if you can get birds to peak together and fly together and handle together, I mean, it doesn't really necessarily matter if you breed them pure or cross them or whatever. They just produce a spectrum of what they are, no matter what way you do it. And so if you can't tell them apart when you're flying them and handling them, feeding them and pointing them out, they're pretty much compatible. But I like to make sure that they're compatible before I start really crossing everything and going that route. So for an example, like if these English birds, if I get the pure ones and I can't get them off the roof, I have to train them completely different than what I've already got. Well, that'd be like a fork in the road. I'd have to look at the birds' potential. Do these English birds have more potential than the birds I've got now? What way am I going to go with it? But if they go up and they fly with my birds and work just like my pigeons, and when I'm putting the best 20 together, if some of those are in there and some of my birds, and well, that really wouldn't matter to me if they cross. But initially, I'd like to see it pure to know that for sure before I'd start really crossing.
Yeah, and that's why I was asking about the multiple families is if you're doing different feeding methods or training methods, and let's say one of the families is reacting totally differently than another one, or how cohesive they'd all be together.
Yeah. And for me, it's just, I take young birds, basically just try to get them into a physical state of, shape, like a form, stamina, endurance, and body condition to do what they're capable of doing. So I get them strong and flying long and then kind of work them back down, where they're, get that fly time where I want it and just kind of handle them. And I've got all these birds. I usually fly like a big mob kit because of the way I work. I don't have time to fly several kits in a day, but I'm just trying to get this big group of birds in the condition they need to be in to show me what they've got. And then from there, I pick the ones that show the traits that I'm looking for, move forward with that, put those in a kit and move on from there. But I think, in the course of a year of handling birds, giving them ample flying time, there's times where you're feeding them up a little, and there's times when you're kind of pulling the feed back, just to keep them managed and kind of balanced out where they can do it. You'll see that birds have better days at different points. And ideally what you want to do is have a kit of pigeons that has that better day, in that same condition. So you're not individually feeding 20 pigeons to have them all at their best. At least that's my opinion on it.
With the rollers being so controlled by feed and stuff like that, when it comes to the breeding season, what's your feeding schedule transferred to?
The base feed for my breeders is a game bird breeder pellet with a probiotic in it. It's name brand's Kalmbach. So that's about 75% of the ration. If pellets just fed alone, the droplings can get a little loose. So I put black oil sunflower seeds in there as well and some other different grains to kind of balance it out. But I basically, I work my breeders hard where when they're not in the molt, they're breeding all the way up to the molt, and then they go through the molt. So they require a good concentrated feed, with a lot of calories and protein and fats, just to keep them going. The flyers, on the other hand, where I'm handling so many birds, I use higher quantities of feed than most flyers, but I use lower quality. I don't really want high protein or high carbohydrate, kind of lower grade, higher fiber feed. That way all the birds can pretty much eat all they want. 24 hours later, turn them loose, they're hungry, they're ready to fly again.
And you mentioned that you'll give supplements to your breeders during the breeding season. What are some of the supplements that you're giving them?
Well, there's this podcast I watch. There's a guy from Kentucky. I can't think of the name. It's that guy. It's that guy you had on here. Got a real good acidifier, like a breeding supplement.
Oh, okay. Is that Castle products?
Yes, Castle Pigeon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do the all natural stuff.
They're listening to this podcast and picked up on that, and I thought that would be really good to try. So I'm using that this year. I really like what I'm seeing. I'll also use Dr. Pigeon. It's got everything in it, man. I think probiotics are really important as well. Probiotics, electrolytes, vitamins, minerals. I give grit, a loose mineral, free choice salt, which a lot of people say don't do it, but I've had a lot of good luck with it. I just basically give my pigeons about every vitamin, mineral, and supplement that they could possibly need. And I feel like if it's there, they're not going to eat it if they don't need it. And if they do need it, they have it,
right,
to eat it. And I've really noticed a big difference in how many more rounds I can get out of a pair of pigeons because of it.
Get more pigeons out of a shorter period of time. And like you say, get right back into focusing on competition flying.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're coming up against the clock here. I want to thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure talking with you as always. People can check out the All Ohio Roller Club. They have a Facebook. Just search that in there, All Ohio Roller Club. You always check out the NBRC website too. If you're into rollers, you should definitely get on there. Gabe, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we have with us Keith London. Keith is a longtime roller man with second place finish in the NBRC Fall Fly in 2004 and has recently earned the title of Master Flyer through the NBRC in 2023. He's also the NBRC Regional Director for the Area 9A. I'm sure many of the listeners know him from his role in the pigeon documentary, Pigeon Kings. We're going to talk with Keith London today about some roller pigeons.
My pleasure.
What's your own background with pigeons, and how'd you get started with rollers, or was it always rollers?
You know, when I was a kid, I had whatever pigeon I can get. I ranged from some regular common pigeons that we caught in somebody's attic or whatever to fantails west of England, whatever it was. The only pigeon I didn't like out of all the pigeons I had and seen was parlors. I just never could get into parlors. That wasn't my cup of tea.
Really? Even with rolling and everything, you couldn't get it, huh?
I couldn't latch on to parlors. But my uncle had pigeons when I was a kid. That's what got me into it. That's what when he first let birds out one time and they turned flips, I was hooked. But I was like 5 or 6 years old then. But I didn't get my own pigeons until I was about 10, and that was like 1974.
When did you start competing with the Birmingham Rollers?
1993. I joined a local club with ICRC, and I started my own club at the same time. And I've been going strong since then. But I didn't start competing nationally until about 96, I think.
Do you compete with any local clubs in your area?
At the moment?
Yeah.
No, because I just moved. So I'm in a whole different area now.
Oh, okay.
But I'm still part of my LA club. I'm still part of it. Even though I'm not down there, I'm still going to be an honorary member, still help them out, help them with their schedule and stuff like that, order their bands. I still do stuff for them.
Let's talk a little bit about the documentary that you were a part of, the Pigeon Kings documentary. They reached out to you, decided to do this. What were some of the points for you that made you want to do this? Was there any kind of messages that you wanted to kind of convey through doing this, or just promoting the hobby?
Well, you got to understand, at first, when Melina first approached me, we were at a pigeon show at Burrow House, Maurizio Hernandez. We were at his house, and when she came in, it was a there filming. Can't remember his name right now, but he was filming, and she said she was trying to do a documentary. So I asked her, "Well, where's your camera at?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just trying to get some people." And I was location scouting. So at that time, we were still on the defense because of the federal government infiltrated our little hobby, and I was one of the suspects. So everybody was a little bit on defense right at that time. But I said to myself, I'm not doing anything wrong, so let's talk about it. We start talking about it, and I thought, we can talk. We can see where it goes from here. We start talking and we can filming and stuff like that, and that's how Pigeon Kings was born. But as far as there's some points, no really real particular points really pop out at this time. They were just trying to do a documentary, trying to get the birds, our roller sport hobby on the map a little bit. That's pretty much it, and what we go through just to have the birds. We were still a little bitter and a little everything because of what the federal government did. We still kind of, we hadn't recovered from that yet. We go out there just like to inform people what we went through.
How long did that take when they were doing the documentary? How long were they actually filming you guys for?
Oh, man, it took a while. I mean, when we started, I was living in Hacienda Heights. When we finished, I was living back in LA. So it took like from 2011 to 2018 or something like that.
Wow.
It took a while.
Wow, I didn't realize it was spread out that far. That's incredible.
Yeah, because we had to take people out of it and all kind of stuff. We had to go through all this other legal stuff with people. Then we had editors, and we lost the editor. Then we had another editor that was giving us a run. We had all kind of problems, all kind of issues with that. So, sound, different issues they were having. Really, I wasn't involved in that part, really. We had to redo some stuff, reshoot some scenes, and get some more clarity. We had issues in LA because I'm so close to the airport. airplanes going over us. The audio wasn't good. A lot of different things.
You mentioned about you guys are still a little bit on edge and with some stuff that happened with the federal government kind of infiltrating in through your local clubs even. Is that something you want to shed some light on?
Yeah, that's no problem because it's public record. Even Channel A&E did a reenactment of our whole case.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't think that was fair. They use us like that. They did a reenactment. I thought they should have had our permission to use our likeness.
Right.
Because they hired actors to portray us and stuff like that. So, well, other than that, man, what happened was there was an undercover agent who came around at different shows and got footage and got people talking about killing hawks and stuff like that. I was one of those people. He caught me with a trap. My hawk was baited and it wasn't set. Then it was set and baited. Then it was set and baited with a hawk inside of it. And then they caught me on camera shooting the hawk while I was in the trap. And I threw it in the trash and they had filmed everything like that. But, it was a little upset at first. And after a while, we kind of started, the guy just did his job and like that. I mean, for whatever reason, he felt that was important. He said, you're not supposed to kill him. Okay, we're not supposed to kill him. But my whole argument was, so it's okay for a wild bird to come in my yard and take my pigeons. But if my dog accidentally get out and hurt somebody else's dog, I can get sued. And we talking about an accident. And the problem I had with them with that was the birds of prey, that particular birds of prey, they weren't here like that. I've been dealing with birds since the 70s. I never had hawk problems until the 90s. And because they were releasing them here, that's the problem. If they were here naturally already, but they weren't, the government put them there. That's why my biggest issue, they put them there. So, we was wrong. We paid our dues, paid our fines, did our probation, and we went on from there. But it's gotten worse since then. It's like 3 times worse now than it was then in LA.
Yeah, I hear stories about how bad the birds of prey are. I feel like the LA area and also, being this breed of bird, you guys get hit so bad. But that whole sting operation is it's shocking, man. They actually had guys undercover, like in your clubs. And they had pigeons too?
Well, they was acting like they had pigeons. I don't think he had pigeons actually. I think he might have bought something from somebody, but I don't know what he did with them. I don't know what they did with them, but
I could see why you'd be a little bit skeptical though when someone comes in there and cameras and wants to record everything you guys are doing. But it's awesome you guys participated because Pigeon Kings, I mean, I think it did a lot for the hobby. Really, I'll tell you what, it got my son into rollers. He was 9 at the time when that came out, and I had homers and he didn't really care about those, but when he saw the rollers, it really opened up his eyes.
Yeah, it's hard. It's crazy because it's hard to get young people involved in that.
Yeah.
Right now, the rollers is kind of hard. We get some involved and the hawk take a few of their birds, they just quit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why should I raise my pigeons and the hawks just gonna come eat them? I mean,
pretty discouraging for a new flyer to be hit repeatedly with their birds. So during the filming, was there any kind of unexpected moments that took place?
As far as the birds of prey, just life.
How about life?
Oh yeah, life. Well, I went through a divorce through the whole recording thing. Well, not the whole thing, not in the beginning, but let me see. I think my divorce proceedings started about 2014, all the way through the end, all the way through Pigeon Kings. I lost my business also. I had a pigeon connection. I couldn't really get people to really come through because of what happened, so lost that. That little whole ordeal messed up a few lives, marriages and stuff like that. I can understand why they think it's more important to save a hawk or something that's come on your property, eating your birds, then it's more important than that when you're going to wreck families and mess up families, break up families because of that. Like, they got everything backwards. Like, the hawk, they put hawk president over people's lives and stuff like that, which I couldn't get. And I can't say it was a racial thing because 2 of the guys that caught with us was white guys, one couple of Hispanic guys, and black. It was all of it. So we can't say it was racial. They were messing up family over an animal that nobody even know exists in the city. Half people that we heard about the case didn't even realize it was hawks and falcons in the city. They didn't even know nothing about it. They said, what? There's hawks out here? I said, yeah. The judge herself said, what am I supposed to do with this? I mean, this is about what? Birds? She was confused. Like, what am I supposed to do with this? She even said, so this is where our tax dollars are going? It's crazy. We just said, okay, we did participate and we did what we did. So, okay, let's just move on from that. But lives are already messed up now. I always say, though, they could have said, you know what? Hey, guys, you guys stop doing this. Blah, blah, blah. It's really against the law. We were under the assumption that at one time that as long as they come in your yard taking your pets and animals, it was okay to defend your animals. You know what I'm saying? She trying to tell me if it came down and you walking your Yorkie and the hawk on top of your Yorkie supposed to let them just eat it. I said, it don't make sense. You know you would do that. They know they wouldn't do that. It's not about us. It's about you guys breaking the law. But wouldn't that be breaking the law also? But at that time, I had pet bulls. I trained my pet bulls to attack if they came in the yard. They're going to protect the birds. Because they would eat the birds, pigeons. If a hawk came out, they would try to get it, but they couldn't. They never got it, but they would try. Hawk stopped coming in the backyard, though. That was just something that happened. We all went through it. We got past that. We kept moving forward.
It's a great documentary. I really do think it's helped the roller hobby a lot, just bring attention. And it's also on such big platforms like Amazon and Peacock and YouTube. I mean, it's getting out to people that have no idea about the Birmingham Rollers or pigeons in general. And I had no idea it took that many years from start to finish.
But it was a lot of technical stuff, though. We lost one editor, and one editor was just playing around, wouldn't come through and do the job, would just. And then we had a good editor, one that finished editing, that did the editing. She came through and Melina's, and she handled that. And the person that did the music, the composer did the music, he did the score for the thing. I think her name is Shonda. She did all that on her own. She composed that from scratch. At the same time, what she did was she did the score, and she would have been finished sooner, but her husband passed away doing it all. So we just went through all kind of issues. We had to edit people out. They wanted to sign a release form and all this, a lot of stuff that was going on with the movie. Then we had to reshoot some stuff, mostly because of sound, by being so close to LAX and the airplanes going over. So we had so many hours of footage you wouldn't believe.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your podcast too, the Roller Agenda podcast.
The Roller Agenda.
When did you start this? Was this before the Pigeon Kings documentary?
Literally right before COVID. No, couldn't have been before COVID, because when COVID hit, we were still doing film festivals. We had to stop the film festivals because of COVID. So then right after that, that's when I started doing the podcast. So it was during COVID when I started. The reason why Roger came out, because people were putting out misinformation to people. They were sending guys the wrong information. And I don't know if they were doing it on purpose or they just didn't know any better. I think it was a mixture of both. They was telling these guys these urban legends that weren't true. That's how it started. And I would let people know that that's not true. That's not how it works. That's not how it goes. That's not how it went. Look at it this way. And that's what I wanted to try to open the guys' eyes to teach them how you do rollers the proper way. That's how the roller agenda started.
Was it just like bad information on training or?
On almost everything. Selection, training, genetics. Like the guys are spending too much time trying to sound important or smart instead of telling people what's really going on.
Yeah.
Things is not difficult. They make it things super difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And things that are difficult trying to make things easy to do. So it's like, y'all have these guys all mixed up.
You have a lot of episodes that go into some really good detailed stuff, really break it down. And yeah, you deliver it in a pretty easy to understand way as well.
That was the whole point. So people can understand what they're doing instead of trying to sound like you're this super genius person and getting people mixed up and confused.
When you're doing your episodes, how do you come up with what theme you're going to go with for each one?
Conversation. I've had a conversation with people, or somebody makes certain statements they make on, they be streaming and live. They say different things that I know is not true, and I just start talking about it. I do got some notes now that start talking about it.
Yeah, and you do see that even fancy and racing pigeons and all that, especially there's a lot of YouTube stuff out there and even just blogs and threads and stuff where you can get on and you'll read one person's answer to, the best things to look for in a racing pigeon, and the comment right below it is the exact opposite. There's so much contradicting stuff out there.
And my whole thing, I've been trying to say, I don't even know why people be telling people some of the stuff they tell them. I mean, the stuff be so far off, it can't be ignorant. Sometimes I think they say they do it on purpose. I don't know if it's to throw people off or make themselves seem like they smart. I'm like, that's not true. That's not how that works.
Well, I mean, that's a thing too, right? I mean, there's some of these people will throw people off just so they can kind of be on the upper hand in that way.
Or have a conversation with somebody, or I hear a conversation. I'll be like you notice, I don't really get on Facebook too much and talk about certain stuff. Guys want to argue and all this kind of stuff. I just go to my podcast and talk about it, or I go to my YouTube channel and show about it. You can talk about it and you can show. I like my YouTube channel because I can show some of the stuff and talk about it and why this is, why this is not, and what you can do, and why you can do it this way, why it comes out this way, like that.
You're doing more of the YouTube now with the podcast?
Yeah, it's all in one. Stuff I talk about, I show now. I try to show it if I can.
What are some of the common mistakes that are always getting repeated in the roller world?
The color dictates performance. Color has nothing to do with performance. I mean, some dudes say that's why they set their family up, but like the common thing was recessive red make your birds roll more and roll deeper. That's so far from the truth because all the birds that's winning right now are all blue checks and red checks. That debunks that theory. It's just that in certain families, their red birds just happen to be hotter. Just happen to be hotter. It's not like they made them hotter like that, but it just happen to be hotter for some reason. And it's not hard to make hot birds that's red. Just put the hottest bird on another hot red bird on another red bird. You start getting them rolling, keep coming together. Eventually, what happens is the character weakens because you just grace going by just roll. And then after that, you can probably get anything from roll downs to birds that don't roll, to birds that roll great, stuff like that. Feather quality might diminish a little bit, not as much as people think, but it does diminish a little bit. But the misconception right now they got is the most elusive thing to say, the statement they make is breed best to best. Everybody don't know what that means. So I did a post purposely on Facebook talking about that, talking about what was your approach to the breeding Birmingham Rollers. They say breed best to best. So I said, what does that mean? Put the best birds to the best birds. So what it means, it's not that simple. Don't say that's all you got. Things like, you just put the best, you have good birds, but it don't work like that. That's not how it works. So I don't go back and forth with them. I just go right to my page and I talk about it on my page. Cause I can ask people, okay, so how has that worked out for you? And these guys are guys that don't really compete. They're not strong competitors, so they'll take it personal, and they want to go back and forth and like dudes get them mad. I know it, brother. I know. Yeah, but you never competed. You did compete. You never was a qualifier. You never won your region. You never scored up to be one of the main people in your region. I mean, so apparently you don't know. So I don't go there with them. I just go on my own platform and talk about the stuff I'm talking about, and I tell them why it don't work that way and the way you can breed best to best and get your own idea. You have your own idea what best to best is. I think best to best to me is two birds that fit best together to give you the best outcome. That's what it is. Because all you got to do is put your best hen on your best cock bird and get good rollers. If it was like that, everybody have good rollers. All you got to do is buy the best birds you see, and put them together, and you automatically got good rollers. It don't work that way. Sorry, it don't work that way. It's not that simple. It's a performance breed. So you got to select for those traits that's going to give you the best performance. And it's all genetic.
Can you talk about your local roller competition that you started, the Put 'em Up or Shut Up Fly? That's a great name, by the way. I like that.
Oh, yeah. So what happened was, me and Bobby Wilson, we was talking one time. So he said, you could come up with a fly called Who Got Rolled? I said, yeah, put 'em up or shut up. It was just a conversation. We never did anything or did anything. So one day, I'm at a bird show at the sheriff's show. So I'm at that show, and these guys are talking about how good their birds are. My birds do this, my birds do that. So I said, you know what? Okay. And then next time I went to the next show, I had flyers talking about put up a shut up. So when they went to the next show, I said, here, this is for you. He said, what? This fly, put them up, shut up. He said, you said you got birds that do 40 feet, they all roll together at the same time and do all this. This is what you witness. And everybody started getting on board with it and just took off from there. But I never flew in it. At that time, I was hot. I was really hot in the game. So some guys said, you flying in it? I said, yeah. And they said, let me see. Nobody wanted to get in when I was flying it. Cause I was hot at that time, so nobody didn't want to be involved as long as I was flying. So I said, you know what? I'm hosting it. I'm not even gonna fly. So I got dropped out of it. Everybody started signing up, and I just never flew in it. But I did host it. I did judge it, and then I was asked why do I need to judge it? I said because guys say things that's not fair. They say stuff like, "Oh, I will never get them bird. What's that family bird you got? Oh, I will never get them that many points." I said, even if they did it, they can't do that. As a judge, how can you say what somebody birds can't do? So they was already being biased already from the start. So I said, I'll just do it myself. That's all you gave those birds? Yeah, what birds play space, bro? That's all you gave them? No, that's all they did. I didn't give them. That's all they did. So that's all they earned. So I ended up judging it. And it turned into a money fly. So I was trying to guarantee 500, but at the time, with enough people flying, I had to come out of my pocket a few times, make sure they got their money. Then I stopped doing that. I started doing the show. The show helped me get the money for the fly. So make sure that the money I said it was going to get, they got. Wasn't the first money fly, like the second money fly we had in L.A. The Royal Rumble was the third money fly. That's going right now. I didn't have nothing to do with that either. I didn't even fly the Royal Rumble when it first started.
Oh, really? You didn't participate in the Royal Rumble?
Not when it first started. I was really just really getting back into my birds strong. I wasn't even really into them like that yet. Fully back into them. So I got in. Never have done anything really. It's too hard. It's too hard in LA.
What makes it so difficult there? Just the competition or the
The
BOPs?
birds of prey. The birds of prey is too tough. I mean, I start the year with a kit that's so good that it probably will win easy. But by the time the fly comes, that kid is diminished. And I have 9 left, and you have 6 or 7 young baby birds that's only a few months old, and there's no chemistry. They can't do it.
The put 'em up or shut up fly, when you were doing that, was it just entry fees that covered the winning pot?
Oh, entry fees. And I did the lawn show to help make up for the rest of the money. Lawn show and auction to help make up for the rest of the money. Which, by the way, most of the birds I auctioned off were usually mine. I had a few friends that gave me a few birds to auction, but most of the birds were mine. I flew the birds and then auctioned them off.
Yeah, that's a good fundraiser.
That's probably one of the best ways to do auction. If you can fly the birds and auction them off, well, everybody would love to have.
That's 100% the way to do it with a performing breed. Like you were saying, all these red birds, just look at them and assume that they're the best. But yeah, you can actually fly them and see them in action.
Yeah, it works way better. People, they jump all over them.
You got any advice or tips for new flyers coming into the roller world?
Well, I got a slogan I use now. After I do all my podcasts, I say select, breed, fly, select again, and repeat. Because that's all you're really doing. It's all about selection. So the key to all that, man, is selection. That's the key. That's the one thing you can't get around, no matter what breed you have. It's selection. You can't get around selection. I don't care if you're doing homers. I don't care if you're doing West of English.
That motto is great because, yeah, that is core of pigeon fancy. That's selective breeding based on what you want to see, what you want to see performance-wise, color-wise.
Results. Yeah, results from flies like the homers, racers. I like homers too. I just never tried it. But I like them. They're very interesting to me.
Can you recommend any books, podcasts, YouTube channels, documentaries, any other resources for listeners who want to learn more about pigeons?
The podcast, there's a lot of different things that's very informative. You got YouTube. Who's on YouTube? You can get. I would check out Kevin McKinney, Mr. Brian McCormick, all the pigeon books, except for some of the recent ones. But mostly all the pigeon books have some good information. Almost all of them. The pencil book, Winners with Spinners, Who's Spinning Rollers. All those books have something good in them, all of them. But you still got to take what applies to you or what you're trying to do. And when dudes get rollers, one of the biggest things I want to tell people is know what you want to get out of them. If you know what you want to get out of them, it's easier than just getting rollers. If you want to do it just for a hobby, that's fine. If you want to compete, you got to go to some of the top competitors and learn what it takes to compete. You know what I'm saying? The dudes get the competition, and they have no clue what it's all about. So you have homers, you actually race.
Yeah, I got homers. There's no race club in my area, so I'm just doing releases for the fun of it. I got fancy birds that we can show and stuff like that. But it's funny, you never really hooked onto parlors. That's kind of the breed I've been really focusing on majority of my time.
You don't try getting those one-lot races?
No, I've never sent out to a one loft race. They're coming up all over the place, and I've been seeing some pretty cheap perch fees on some of them. That makes it pretty appealing to give it a shot, but it's still a pretty big gamble. There's some people that are buying some pretty expensive and good bloodline birds. They're throwing in their hat. You're kind of just paying their fees and paying their pots.
I talked to some guys that have homers. Different guys on the internet. This one guy, this Asian guy, I'm not sure, I can think of his name, but he always shipping birds out. So I said, we ship out young birds. What do they do with them? He said, they usually keep them for stock. They keep them for stock, for breeding.
Yeah, some keep them or auction.
Oh, yeah. But the guys right here trying to look down on people who do that, who buy birds, young birds, use them for stock. And they probably look down on them, but I'm like, why would you spend $200 or $300 for a pigeon and then put it in the air and let the hawk eat it? I mean, that makes no sense. That's like hustling backwards. And they get mad at these young dudes for doing that, but I said, that's one way they can keep their bird. You know what I'm saying? But they be knocking them. I don't knock them. I just do what you need to do.
Yeah, one-off races are getting real popular.
Yeah, I kind of want to get a pair of homers to do that. The one-off races.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. I don't even have homers.
All right, well, we're coming up against the clock here. Check out his podcast. It's dedicated to the Birmingham Rollers, the Roller Agenda. You can find that where you can find most podcasts, Spotify, stuff like that. You can find the documentary Pigeon Kings on Amazon, YouTube, and Peacock. And that's a great documentary. If you haven't seen it yet, you got to check it out. That's a great pigeon documentary. And his YouTube channel is KL, like Keith London, KL Phoenix Rollers. That's his YouTube channel. That's where he's currently keeping all of his current content right now is coming out. Take a look at all that. Really good information, especially if you're a roller guy. You got to participate in that. So, Keith, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with us today. It's been great.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest. Just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. All right, hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. Today we have with us Gabe Glenn, the president and one of the founders of the All Ohio Roller Club. Gabe has judged the NBRC 20-bird competitions, numerous 11-bird competitions, and was offered the opportunity to be the national finals judge for the NBRC in the 11-bird. He will also be leaving the 3rd of October to judge the Tennessee region for their 11-bird NBRC competition. He has an impressive fly record, which goes the 2021 regional NBRC fly, second in the 11-bird, third in the 20-bird, 2022 NBRC regional 11-bird, first and second, 2022 NBRC national final 11-bird, first and third, winning the national with the highest recorded score in history of 702 points. 2023 AORC All Ohio Roller Fly first place. 2023 NBRC Regional 11 first place. 2024 World Cup Regional Fly second place. 2024 World Cup Final third in North America and 13th overall. And the 2024 AORC All Ohio Fly third place. Gabe, thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I definitely feel like you guys have a really good, strong club up there, and we'll get into that. But first, let's hear a little bit about your background with pigeons and why rollers in specific. What kind of brought you into them?
You know, I think the rollers kind of picked me. I was a kid, 9 years old, into any kind of livestock or animal. Coming off the school bus one day, noticed a pigeon on the roof, and it wasn't just a wild pigeon. There was something special about it. It had some white on it and a little leg band. A guy that worked for my dad said that it was a carrier pigeon and I needed to get the message off its leg so it could, go back to its home. So it was kind of like a challenge accepted. I caught that bird at night with a flashlight and a dip net. Man, I tried like crazy to get that message off its leg. Well, it ended up being an NBRC band. My mom had told me that my older cousin was into roller pigeons. He would know what to do with the bird and how to get it back to its rightful owner. So that's how I got started. I met him and he introduced me to the Portsmouth Roller Club, and I was just head over heels at that point. I was really into it, all aspects.
What age did you start competing?
I think the first competition I flew, I was like 12. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't have a documentation of it, but it was in 1996.
Have you ever messed around with racers or any fancy birds? Or it's always been rollers for you?
I've been interested and have got other pigeons, but they quickly go to the back burner.
Yeah.
I'm a roller guy. They just kind of get in the way and eat feed after that first infatuation kind of wears off. They're just more of a pain. So I've had them and getting rid of them, sticking to the rollers.
So that's pretty funny that the first bird you saw had an actual NBRC band on it.
Yeah, and it was actually raised from Joe Rowe, which wasn't like the hero back in those days. He won the World Cup championship in 1993 and was the first American world champion. So everybody was really, held his birds in high regard. So it was kind of crazy that the first one that flew to my house was from him. When I met up with the guy at the Pigeon Club who actually owned the bird, I'd had the bird probably a week and a half or 2 weeks. He said, "Do you like that bird?" And I said, "Man, I love this bird." And he said, "Well, just go ahead and keep it. It's your bird." And so, I was pretty tickled, to get that bird and have it. And the guys in the club, the older guys, they saw this new guy coming in, a little kid fired up about birds. So I didn't really know what I was getting into, but one of the older guys, Roy Thayer, he said, "Would your parents let you have more pigeons?" And I kind of went down this road with, my dad already. I was like, "Man, can I keep some? Can I get some?" And my dad told me as long as I kept my grades up and, did my chores, I could get some more birds. So when Roy asked me that, I kind of stretched the truth a little bit. I remember it because I kind of felt a little guilty after I said it, but I said, as long as I get good grades and do my chores, my dad said I could have all the pigeons I want. But anyway, that next month on the next meeting, I went and sat through, and it was kind of boring, really. I was hoping there'd be pigeons everywhere, like show and tell with birds, but it was actually just a bunch of, old guys talking about minutes and stuff that I really didn't understand. And when the meeting was over, I was kind of a little disappointed, but Roy, he had like one of those 80s LTDs that had like a trunk that looked like you could fit about 10 bodies in it. And yeah, he said, come over here. And he popped that trunk and showed me those birds. I said, man, them things are beautiful. He said, well, they're yours. Take them. And so I took those with me, and that's kind of how I got started. A lot of guys really generous with knowledge and birds, and
That's
and
awesome.
so it's pretty cool.
You know, you hear that a lot too about someone giving a bird, you know, man, the first one's free. You know, you're going to get that bug, and it's just going to kind of go on from there. When did you guys start the All Ohio Roller Club? How long has that been around for?
It's really new. In 2021 is when I met Steve Rose and Richard Miller. And so basically it was just like an idea. It was just like, the three amigos, trying to get something started. Richard really lined us out kind of in the morals, like what we needed to do. It's like, we're going to raise good birds. When guys want to get started, we're going to give them good birds. We're going to help them out with information. So Richard was real adamant about getting us started kind of on the right foot that way. Steve Rose, he's a social kind of guy, knows a lot of people and talks to a lot of people. And he had the Facebook thing going, which I never had Facebook or anything like that. So he kind of put the stuff out there. And then I worked on looking up NBRC members that were located in Ohio and called. But all that took place in 2021. I think we had like 8 members on one of our first meetings. We drummed up 8 guys, and then it's just kind of grown from there, and it just keeps growing. We're really fortunate.
Any tips you can give to other pigeon club members and people with pigeon clubs that are struggling at all? I mean, you guys seem to be pretty successful with, a lot of your members seem to be pretty active in the club.
The tip I would give to other clubs and other guys that are wanting to help their clubs grow is kind of come out of your comfort zone and put the hobby out there. It wasn't real easy for me to just call random numbers of people that I didn't know and talk to them and try to invite them to a club. But I felt like it was, something that I could do to potentially help guys kind of get together, because there are people out there that felt the same way I do about the birds, but didn't know anything was really going on. So I think you got to, go out of your comfort zone and do a little extra. Not everybody's got the same skill set. Nick Rogofsky is our secretary, and he's been great. He was one of the first guys heard about the club through the Facebook, and since then he's put rollers on Facebook and made flyers and put them up. And so it just takes people kind of putting the word out there. To me, I'm a guy that uses analogies. It's kind of like fishing. You just throw a bunch of lines out there. When someone bites, you can't pass it off and think, well, I'll call them back next week or next month. You just go ahead and get back with them and invite them over, be courteous. Can't be afraid to meet new people or have different people at your house. You just kind of got to put that aside and go for it. But I've met a lot of great people in this hobby by doing that.
So were a lot of these guys kind of new into rollers, or were they kind of guys that were just flying for themselves on the side before they found you? Or
a little bit of both. Initially, it was guys that had rollers for quite a while. Right now, if you look at our club, I mean, probably, I don't know, I would say 3/4 of the people that are in our club have been in rollers less than 3 years. So they're all new to it and flying competitions for the first time and stuff like that. So a lot of new members. It's surprising, really, how many people are animal people are interested in birds, but they really don't know the hobby exists. And once it exists, if you can invite them to a show or a fly, a meeting, or even just invite them out to your house, if they show interest, it's really neat how many people kind of end up enjoying this hobby, just like we do.
let's talk a little bit about your own pigeons and setup. So how many lofts and rollers do you have right now?
Too many.
Is that it?
um, yeah, I got bit by the bug pretty hard. So for the first year, it was like I just kept building on, and every time I'd build something extra, I think, well, that should do me. I'm done, and I just keep going. But I've got a main breeder loft that will accommodate 20 pair, and then I converted a horse stall into another breeding loft that'll hold 12 pair, and then I've got an individual breeder that will hold 6 pair, and I've got about, I don't know, 7 kit boxes that'll hold about 30 birds each, and then a kit loft that'll hold about 150. So I've got plenty of space, but I never have it all the way full. I've got less than 200 birds right now, and I breed from I breed from a little like extra pairs than what I would particularly like to, just so that I have extra birds if people need birds to get started. I figure if I only raised them for myself, I wouldn't be able to, help people get going. So I kind of breed some extra. So I use, instead of using 16 pair, I'm using around, 22 to 25 pair a year. And instead of raising 100 birds, I'm going 170 to 200. I'm pretty well into it. I mean, you walk back in that backyard, you're at a pigeon man's house.
Yeah. What's your family based on? What kind of bloodlines do you have there?
When I was a kid, the birds I got from Roy Thayer and those guys in the Portsmouth Roller Club had a lot of Hardesty blood in them. So when I got back into birds, I was really looking for Hardesties.
Okay.
And I called Carl. He recommended me talk to Bob Bettis, and I talked to Bob Bettis and got birds from Bob. They're down from Hardesty bloodlines. I was actually fortunate enough, the first guy that, really hooked me up with a bunch of pigeons, Roy Thayer. I was able to get some of his birds as well. He was older and his health was bad. He's since passed away, but he had got out of birds, and I was able to get some of his breeding stock, and they're in my birds today. And a real big kind of shot in the arm was my cousin John Bender. He called me and said Rich Hayes was selling some birds, and he was a former world champion. And so I called Rich Hayes and talked to him. We hit it off right off the bat. I bought several pair from him. So that was the initial, start of what I had. I had those birds and flew them, and they worked and they did what I wanted them to do. But I'm always, if there's something better out there, I like to have it. I don't want to sit on something second best. I'd like to fly the best birds there are,
Yeah.
and so I'm always looking and trying different bloodlines. I've had a lot of great families in here, but as far as like handling different types of pigeons, like once, like those first birds I learned how to manage those. I basically, if the group of pigeons wasn't doing good, then I knew it was me. And so I learned how to get the best out of those particular birds. Now, now that I've kind of established that and selected from birds that excelled the way I was managing them, bringing new birds in, they're kind of, they're at a disadvantage. So some birds really didn't work as well with the way I was managing, and I do manage. It seems like quite a bit different than most people.
What is that? What is your management style?
Like on feeding the kit birds, I typically feed the birds all they can eat. When they come in from a fly, so I'll fly them and I'll watch them eat. When they're about done eating, like they're eating slow, then I'll put them back in the kit box or pull a feed tray. There's a lot of families of really good pigeons that, if you feed them that way, they'll fly high or fly way too long and not roll as much. But I've noticed that some of my most frequent better rollers, you could feed them all they'd want every day, and they'd go up on a perch and they'd sit there quiet. And when you turn them back out the next day or the next time you flew them, they'd just roll like crazy. So I kind of selected for that. So throwing different families in that doesn't really work. Most people that fly rollers are really disciplined on the way they feed, the amounts and the grains, and I feed really liberally.
Yeah, I mean, feed always seems to be the common thing. We spoke earlier and you said that part about, you want a family of birds that matches your management style, so everyone's, working together. It's a real cohesive thing.
Yeah, and for me it was the way I work. I've also got a farm and two boys in high school that are in sports and everything. So time's really divided. So I don't have time to like micromanage small groups. So a lot of times I'll put up really huge kits of pigeons. I might have an hour and a half that evening or that day that I can sit and watch them, but I watch them like a hawk. I watch everything they do. I pick the workers out of there. I feel like I'm more of like a college scout, like scouting for talent rather than someone that's trying to figure out, how to, get them to work. They're working for me. I've selected birds for that, and I think I've had some pretty good luck, but it definitely is not a system that would work with all birds.
I mean, it definitely makes sense. So let's talk about the big NBRC convention that's going to be coming up, and your club is going to be hosting this convention. It's going to be September 12th through the 14th. What city is that going to be in?
It's in Columbus, Ohio.
It's in Columbus. Okay. Can you give us a little breakdown of the convention that's going to be going on there? And
Yeah, the convention is actually held at the Columbus Airport Marriott, and the NBRCs will have rooms, and many of the members have reservations there. there'll be a meet and greet on Thursday evening, and then Friday morning we'll go out, do loft visits, and come back in. Then Saturday, we'll do some more loft visits, come down south. I'm the final place on Saturday. We'll have a little auction and do some raffles and stuff. And then we'll get back to the Columbus Airport Marriott. And I think the banquet starts at 6, if I'm not mistaken. They'll, I think, auction more stuff off, have more raffles, have some speakers and stuff like that. So should be a really good time. A lot of good bird, man.
Did you guys already do the auction for your club?
No, the auction's actually starting tomorrow, so it'd be the 28th of August, which I know this will probably not be out then, but the the convention auction will start 2 weeks prior to the convention and end during the convention.
Okay, so there'll still be an opportunity to get on there and pick up some of those birds then through the
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be some really good birds on that auction. So
and that's through the National Birmingham Roller Club website.
yeah, MBRC and the auction page that they have.
You and some other club members are going to be turning some birds out on the last day of the convention, right?
Oh yeah, every loft visit, a guy will fly some birds, and it's going to be kind of cool because the guys that are putting up kits during the convention are going to have a bird marked up or a different bird where people can easily identify it, and they're donating that bird. The people there will be able to pick a bird out of the sky and bid on it.
You can actually see the bird roll. You don't got to take the person's word for it. Man, this thing rolls
Right?
like crazy.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to go to any of these the NBRC conventions before?
No, I haven't. So this is
Okay.
my first one. It's kind of crazy. It's a lot because we're hosting it, and the guys from the MBRC do a lot of work. Danny Galarza and Danny Sturgeon and the other guys, they do a lot of work, but there's still a lot of leg work that our club members are doing. So right now I'm a pretty busy guy.
It's really good to kind of get that much, to have the convention up there in Columbus and raise awareness for all those other roller guys that might be in the area and might not know about other roller clubs nearby.
Yeah, it was an opportunity kind of presented to us, and I didn't really think we were ready for it. Personally, I brought it up to the guys, and I was kind of surprised that they were on board. They wanted to do it, so we're doing it. I mean, we're a new club, young club, and I think that's part of the appeal. We've there's a lot of like optimism, and like it's a good environment we've got going on. So I think like judges and people that have been here have had a good time. So I'm sure that the convention's going to be a great time.
Is your club got a lot of junior members, does it?
When I say young guys, I'm talking, we have some guys in their 20s.
Okay.
The pigeon hobby is, there's a lot of guy with a lot of people with gray hair.
Yeah,
So,
well, that's everywhere, that's in all aspects of it for sure.
yeah, we do have a couple junior members, a couple younger people flying kits. They've done pretty well. Kiona Ritterbeck and her dad, they put up a kit together and they did really well. It was their first time flying, and man, it was just everybody there was happy watching those birds. I mean, it's nice when someone gets started and you try to give them good birds, and you go to their place on a competition day and they turn them loose and they're working good. That really put a smile on everybody's face. DJ is Kiana's dad. Just that family, the husband, wife, and daughter, were just all smiles ear to ears, and it was pretty cool. And then we've got Wyatt Jones. His dad's Brett Jones, and they fly together. Wyatt will put up a kit, and the club flies and stuff. So it's nice. We do have some younger members, but for the most part, when I say like young people, I'm talking about like the 20 and 30-year olds that we've got.
You said something right there too I want to touch on, is that when you give somebody a pair of birds, you're giving them good birds. It's, you don't got to give them your absolute best favorite champion, but if you give somebody some garbage birds, you might as well not give them anything at all, because that's not going to encourage them to continue on. And that's for racing, fancy, rolling, whatever. If you're going to give them
Yeah.
some birds, give them something that they can enjoy. If you're really doing it to help the hobby, I think that's a really good point right there.
Yeah, and that's something that Richard Miller was adamant about. And I just remember in the beginning, him, really being so adamant about it. I was like thinking, man, how are we going to do this? I looked at my birds and I was like, I don't even have very many good birds. And, he's just look at you dead serious. And, like, if you're going to give person birds, you give them good birds. So there's ways to get rid of the birds that you don't like. I mean, there's auctions, like Amish auctions, and people that keep them as pets, and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's always outlets.
Yeah, when someone wants to get they come to your house and they see roller pigeons, they don't want junk that you wouldn't put up. They want what you've got. So you've definitely got to go the extra mile. And I forget who it was that said if it doesn't hurt when you give a person a pigeon, you didn't dig deep enough. But that's kind of the way we've tried to do it. And a lot of times seems like it doesn't really pan out one way or the other. Maybe they don't get such great birds or have such great luck, but a lot of times it does. So you'll go to a place and a person will raise a bird, and I mean it's just the ideal roller pigeon. So they're in the game, and the only thing they need to do is just raise a few more like that, and they'll have a good competition kit.
Are there other roller clubs up there in your area, or?
We're in the region with Michigan, and they've got the Great Lakes Roller Club.
Oh, is it really that far apart? Wow, because you're like Southern Ohio, right?
Yeah, they were a little reluctant to kind of pick me up at first, because I was so far out. They picked me up, and we've been flying together, and the hobby's been growing, and so it's good. Michigan's got a lot of good guys up there, good flyers, and we do too. We've got a pretty good region. Wayne Cumberworth last year, I can't remember exactly what place he got in the World Cup finals, but I think he was like sixth in the world, somewhere around in there. But so I mean, the guys that do good in our region tend to do good in the finals. A lot of good pigeons around, so it's a good area to be in the birds.
No, absolutely. How did you guys do with your region this year? I mean, I see some of the stats that you did pretty good on this year's fly.
Our region flew enough kits in the World Cup to put 3 qualifiers into the finals. All 3 of our qualifiers in the finals were in the top 10 for America, in the World Cup. So once they got into England and other countries, they started putting guys up above us. But, if you look at the whole country, one region putting 3 guys in the top 10,
right?
That's a pretty strong region for this country. The guys that beat me, Brian McCormick and Jeff DeWitt. Now they put some space in between me and them. So we've got our work to do, but we're pretty solid. So we're on the right track.
Oh, that's great. Anybody that wants to find out more about your the All Ohio Roller Club, you guys do have a Facebook group, I believe.
Yeah, we've got the All Ohio Roller Club Facebook page. That's probably one of the best ways. Then there's also the NBRC on their site. They've got a member listings, and they've got a directory, and you can get members' phone numbers. So, if a person's not good with Facebook or doesn't have Facebook, they could get on the NBRC website and go to Ohio and look up the members. People are more than welcome to give me a call anytime, send me a message. If you want to talk about pigeons, I'll talk your ear off.
Yeah, and the NBRC website also has everything on there about the upcoming convention going on, and that's also where you're going to go for the bidding as well.
Yep.
Well, I hope you guys have a lot of success at the convention, and you guys, I'm sure it's going to be just a really good time for everybody who goes. And definitely appreciate you coming on and talking pigeons with me today.
Oh man, I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for having me on as a guest. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least 5 stars for the podcast wherever you do listen. If there's ever a topic or a person that you'd like to hear more about on the podcast, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com, and thank you for listening. Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. We have a very special episode for you today, so stick around. Today we're talking with Kevin Monroe. He is a judge for judging roller pigeons in their competitive flies. He's been flying rollers for 45 years and judging rollers for over 30 years. He's a member of the NBRC, the National Birmingham Roller Club, as well as a local club, the Lone Star Spinners, located in Texas. Kevin, thanks for coming on and talking roller pigeons with us today.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.
So let's get the intro into how you got into pigeons, and then we'll talk about how you got into judging the roller pigeons.
Yeah, so I started out at about 11 years old. I had a friend of mine on my Pee Wee baseball team. He and I become friends, and and he had a couple of pigeons that he had homed into a little wire cage mounted right underneath the eave of his house. He showed them to me, and it was the king and the princess was their name. Still remember their names, as funny as that is. But they would fly around all on top of the house and up to the telephone lines and back again. And I just thought it was the coolest thing. And so I built me a loft, I guess you'll call it, out of 4 sheets of plywood around and made a box and two on top. And I just moved a little piece of plywood open enough for me to walk in there and water and feed them. And that was my first loft. And we went and caught pigeons from out underneath the bridge and borrowed the neighbor's ladder. We put it back, of course, but we borrowed it late at night and would go up to the bridges that wasn't too far off and made our rounds to two bridges that we could get to walking. That's how I got started right there, is catching pigeons underneath a bridge.
Oh, that's very cool. It's easier to catch them at nighttime when they're not all active.
Oh, yeah.
How did you get into doing judging for the roller pigeons?
It was out of necessity, really. We started in a local club back in 1986 with a guy named Gary Tollett. He was the president. Sam DeMamio, some of you roller guys might remember him. They had a club, Texas Roller Club. They flew here and there and had fun flies, and there wasn't really no judging there, but there was a need for it. Club kind of died away when Gary fell out as a leadership role. He kind of dropped out. His wife had got sick, and Sam and this other fella named Bill Dunson put it back together in 1989. At that point, we had some guys that was real energetic and getting going in the competition direction on a regular basis. So we just started all judging together, and the seniors like Sam and Bill would compare their scores with ours, and we all kind of got on the same page of what we was looking for. It's kind of where it started all through the 90s, up in about 97. A guy named Rick Delahaye, he had placed, I think, second in the world, if I'm not mistaken. And he came through and judged our area in 1996. So in 97, he invited me to his place up there and showed me their local club and how they judged and how they had a certification program that they used up there that, you had to meet certain criteria and you get certified. Well, I asked him and another leader of their club to come down. They lived up in Arkansas. And I asked them, if I paid their way, our club did, would they come down here and get us started, in the certification program? And that was 97. Sure enough, they did. A few of us got certified, and that's where it all started at, getting going that direction. Started judging for others, 2000, from 2000 on up. I've judged all over the United States.
When a club gets started, specifically a roller club, does the NBRC kind of give you guys guidelines to follow? Because I'm sure that the judging has to be pretty much across the board, right?
The judging currently is in need of a certification program, and hopefully one day we'll get together with officers and stuff and get something going in that direction. But yeah, we follow a set of rules that the World Cup puts out and the NBRC, and they kind of mimic each other. The NBRC tries to kind of follow along with the World Cup the best that we can. There's a few differences here or there, but predominantly they're the same set of rules as far as how many flyers it takes to get a qualifier. Now that's different from the NBRC because it takes, 10 kits, 10 teams. Each person can fly 2 teams each if they can, but it takes 10 of them flown to get a qualifier. In the World Cup, it takes 7 people. It don't matter how many kits you fly. Well, it does. You cannot fly more than 2, but they want 7 people for one qualifier. It's a little bit harder to accomplish, whereas you can do it with 5 people flying 2 kits each in the NBRC.
So can you break down how it works as far as the 11 bird fly and the 20 bird fly?
Yep, absolutely. So it was around 90, I think it was around 97 again, 98 right in there. Art Hopkins was the president, and he wanted to get something going, a different competition, because some of the guys down south, over in the Carolinas and stuff, they competed with what they back then, I think it was a 12 bird, but it may have been 11 bird. But it was judged specifically for the performance of individual birds. And so we looked out in the 11 bird for quality of the spin and depth, entering into the row and exiting out of the row, and then the return back to the team and the performance in between. It's all part of it. It has to be, superior. It has to be above average to even get on the scoreboard with 11 bird. Now, and that, not like I said, it came into play in '98. Art went out there and brought it into our system. He was the president at the time of the NBRC, and he brought it into the NBRC, and it ran conjunction with a 20 bird. At the time, all the way up until the last few years, you could only, if you wanted to fly an 11 bird, you only had an option of flying two teams. If you wanted to fly two and 11 bird, well, you couldn't fly any in the 20. If you wanted to fly the 20, two and the 20, then you couldn't fly any 11, or you could fly 1 and 1. You had them three options, as the way that what you could fly in. Here recently, they changed it and made it where we could separate it and have two different flies altogether with our regions. You can have two teams in each one now. So that was a big bonus, not only for the people, for the birds, and for the club, the income. It increased it probably double, I would imagine, because you could put two more teams entered, and you pay for each team you enter. So the 20 bird, I don't want to be jumping all around here, but let me catch you up on the 20 bird here. The 20 bird is judged on birds performing in unison. They have to roll a minimum of 5 at a time. They have to roll adequate to the judge's standard. That's the minimum that they can score. And they have a point system going from a 1.0 for quality. They have from 1.0 to 2.0. So you can go 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, etc., all the way down to 2.0 as far as getting a quality multiplier. Okay, now they also have a multiplier known as the depth multiplier, and it's the same scale, 1.0 to 2.0, all the numbers in between. And a common one used is say 1.3, you'll see a 1.3 quality given to a flyer and say a 1.3 or 1.4 depth. It's usually really close in the depth. And so you times them two together, you get a total multiplier bonus. And you take that and you times it times the raw score. So in the 20 bird, like I said before, they got to roll 5 at least, but they can roll as many as 20 being a full turn. I've been seen maybe once that I can remember on a national level, recorded as a 20 bird turn. But so 5 to 9, you get 1 times your raw score. So if you had 10 breaks, you would have 10 points. Okay, so that's going to be on the raw score. So if you're going with birds breaking 5 at a time and you have 10 5-bird breaks, that's going to be 50 points. So the judge, as he's judging, he'll have a scribe, and the scribe will be writing down whatever the judge calls out. So he'll call out, remember, it goes 5 birds minimum that have to go at one time to make it to the score sheet, and they got to be adequate to the judge's standard. So the judge will call out 5, 6, give me a 9. Give me a 7, and that's the birds as they're breaking in the air in unison. He's calling them out to the scribe. So all them numbers are 9 or less. So you'll add them up. Say you come up with 65 points that are birds 5 to 9 is how many that was added up. Now that'll be your 65 points raw score. You'll take that and you'll multiply that, and you say you didn't get anything else. You take that 65 raw and you multiply it by the bonus factor. Now that's your quality and your depth times each other, and you come up with a bonus factor. The bonus factors times your raw score, and that gives you the final score. Okay, back to the score sheet. As the judge is calling out to the scribe, if he calls out anything from a 10 to a 14 bird break, it's times 2, and that'd be times 2. And it's going to be your raw score. And then the same with the 15 to 19, it's going to be times 3. So you're wanting bigger breaks in unison to get the bigger points. And then all that comes up, with your raw score. And again, it goes times your bonus factor and gives you the total score. And then a judge has some comments at the bottom.
So the 11 bird sounds like it's more of individual birds, and then the 20 is a team. So do guys have different kits? Like this kit works better as a team. This is going to be my whatever 20 bird, and then you just kind of put all your aces in the 11 bird.
So that's a really good question. So a lot of us divide our birds into cock and hen teams as they get older, especially. And when you're selecting for your 11 bird competition, some people only have a 20 bird team. So they'll take their 11 best out of their 20 bird team and fly them as 11 bird. It's not real common for somebody to have an ultimate 11 bird and an ultimate 20 bird, two different teams. It's not common for them not to to pick the very best out of their 20 to showcase over here in the 11. That's what you see more than not.
And you were talking about some of the depth and the frequency and the type of the roll. How do you judge, like, what's a clean roll look like? Is it just a speed thing, like a really fast rotation, or?
Man, if you could just vision a 10-foot, 3-inch metal fence post, that is the ultimate spin. 10 foot, just looks like a straight sleeve. The bird's is so balled up. It just looks like a straight fence post poured out of the sky. Just zip straight down. You don't see no wings sticking out. He balls up like the size of a tennis ball, baseball, and just straight. The ultimate for me is what I call a blur out. He just looked like a shrunken blur. He's about the size of a softball as he's going into it, and he shrinks down to like the size of a racquetball, and then you can see him come back out as he's coming out of the spin. It's just that is the ultimate for me, is the shrunken blur.
Because these are the multiplying factors. If someone's really trying to get a high score, so they got to be rolling in the first place. Like you said, there's actually a minimum of 5, right? 5 rolls on the 20 bird.
Yep.
And then you got, like you're saying, the quality of it. So what's more important, depth, quality, speed?
Well, it depends on who you ask. For points wise, to gain points, you want kit chemistry. You want your birds working together, big breaks, and often. You want them breaking up in the 15 birds and more range. The more of them you get, that triples your score. Each one of them, a 15 bird break is 45 points, and you get 4 of them, you do the math. So, let's back up. Let's go 14 bird breaks. That's only times 2. See, 1 bird makes the difference right there. The bigger the breaks, the more frequent the breaks, the higher the score. And if you got your team working the whole 20 minutes and they're breaking big, the judge will give you high multipliers. They really like the big breaks and frequency. When you'll see a team that's worked well 20 minutes, he's going to get good multipliers, and it shows. So usually you get that, and you got half the battle won. If you get big kit chemistry, yeah, that's what we're looking for.
And this is a performing bird, and like we're talking about these birds doing, really amazing things really fast, and that's got to be tricky to judge itself. But is there a body style or wing type or just this general size of when you look at a bird outside of it flying, just you're looking at them in a cage, can you tell if that bird's going to have what it takes to be a good roller, or it could be any kind of type, shape, conformation?
Some people might be able to go and look at a bird on a perch and tell you, a lot of times you can know if a bird is a row down, if he's got an issue or something. Sometimes I can catch that by looking at a bird on a perch, but as far as being an ultimate performer or something, a wing type, or they come in all different shapes and sizes. Our Birmingham roller, it has no standard, for our Birmingham rollers, because they're so all over the place. Some of them are long casts, look like a thoroughbred horse, lean and tall and sleek, and the other ones are short, cobby, wide chest, got a tight tail. You hold them in your hand like a racing homer, the head facing your chest, the feet tucked underneath his tail, spread his wings out, and that tail is so tight, 1 pin tail. Some of them are like that, and other ones, my family, my birds have got a loose tail in the hand. Their tail's probably 2.5 inches wide, looking down at it. It's loose. It's not, tight. What do I prefer? I prefer that tight one for my racing homers, like a 1 pin tail. That looks the best. I didn't breed for it. Or, my birds have a looser tail in the hand. They kind of got a sleek look to them. And families, again, I mentioned families. It all starts in the breeding loft. You breed toward the spin. This is what I came up with. This is the birds that I use. They all kind of mimic each other. As far as having a picture perfect bird, I got, I like the old Hardesty birds, the Joe Rowe birds. They're cobby chest and feel great in the hand, and man, they can pack the roll. I wasn't able to do, what other people has done with that family. And again, the families fit, what you can do. You need to find birds, if you're starting out, find birds that work for you and your schedule and your climate, your area, because it's different everywhere.
That's interesting. We spoke with Gabe Glenn earlier, and we were talking about different bloodlines of rollers, and that was exactly what he said. He said, find something that works with your style of management in your area.
Yep. That's a good guy. Gabe's a good guy. I'm glad I met him. He was one of the members in the Ohio group that sponsored the convention this last year. We got to go to his house, and his birds put on a real good show. And he and his wife both were just super nice folks.
Very cool. We got to see his birds go. That's nice.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So you mentioned too, and I never thought about this, that the judge is talking to a scribe, which I don't know. I never thought of it, but I mean, yeah, it makes sense. The guy can't be looking down at a notebook and keeping tally. He's got to have his head up in the sky the whole time.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
it's such a fast thing to judge. What other kind of challenges make it difficult when you're judging something like this kind of fast performing bird?
You got the predators like anybody else does. That's real challenging when you get hit. Bad weather, the weather makes all the difference in the world. You got 20 minutes on the clock. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but time is always, something you have to look at. You got to fly a minimum of 15. And if you get hit by a predator, you can call a timeout. You got a 5-minute timeout for bad weather or predator attack. And anything that happens to your birds after that bad weather or that predator messes with them, it don't affect your score. Pretty much whatever you got up to that point in your points, you won't lose them. Your birds do have to fly a minimum of 15 minutes. So you can have that 5-minute timeout, and then your birds have to fly another 10 minutes and adjacent to the 5-minute timeout.
Are flyers allowed to turn up another kid if like a BOP comes through and scatters them? Can they just put another one up, or they just got to wait 5 minutes and hopefully they get back to it?
They don't have to wait 5 minutes. They can call time back in at any time. And if they call time back in at any time and they have birds scattered, then the judge is required to judge the biggest group of birds that are together. Like say you got a 20 bird team and you got 8 birds together and the rest of them are all chaotic everywhere. He has to judge them 8 birds right there. And any birds that come back in are allowed to come back in. But that group right there never changes. He can't go from this 8 to this 8 over here to get together. He has to stay with the original 8 that he starts with, or the original biggest group that he starts with. He has to judge them birds, and as they come back together, they'll just continue to get judged.
Well, that could definitely hurt your score then if you you lose all those numbers like that all at once.
Oh yeah, and it messes with their minds. They come out flying. Sometimes if they've been hit hard, they'll be coming out flying fast and looking over their shoulder left and right. Where's he coming from? And trying to get up, trying to get way up. To get some distance between him and them.
Yeah, I've seen that before. They'll just go and become dots in the sky. And how could you judge something like that? It's so high up.
Oh, you can't. You gotta. If you can't see the wing beat, you can't judge them. Some people claim they can, but I can't, and I won't. I won't judge them if I can't see their wing beats. You can't tell the quality of the spin. You can see movement. You can tell they're breaking up there, but you can't tell the quality of the spin. If they're driven up, I've seen a hawk stay underneath them, drive them up out of sight, lose a team. I've seen it countless times.
Outside of BOPs, are there any notable moments or surprises you've had during a judging experience?
Police coming up wanting to know what we're looking at. That's pretty amusing. We got pictures of that back in the late 80s. Yeah. Anything, no, I can't say as I have, just that's pretty devastating in itself, man. And it's part of all the pigeon world, we just got to raise enough, to feed them and to compete.
Yeah, that's a hard truth right there. Through selective breeding, all facets of it, whether it's racing or fancy or rolling, it's all about selective breeding to get to this point where we're having birds do these amazing things. And especially with the rollers, I feel like they've really become a lot more dramatic just in such a short period of time. You're getting some really, really high performing birds, but overall, like even in the hobby itself, what do you see the future of the roller pigeon hobby?
I see with the right direction and a certified judging system put into place, I see it excelling. I see it growing and thriving, but there's going to have to be some common ground with the judging, because the judges just got too big of difference in their perspective of what's right and what's not, and awarding of these the multipliers, and what deserves this multiplier and what deserves that multiplier. It's all over the board as how different judges see it right now. That's going to have to be addressed, I think, to gain ground in the future.
Any advice you give to any aspiring judges for judging rollers?
Get underneath a team every time you can, even your own. We calling out multipliers where you got them at, where you think they're at, calling numbers, calling breaks. Go any time you get the opportunity to judge, jump on it, build experience.
What about new flyers? Someone who maybe has racing pigeons or, is just interested in getting into this. Like, where would be like a good safe spot? There's so much online scamming and stuff like that. Where would be a good safe spot for getting rollers and getting into a club of some kind?
Yeah, so I've recommended these two things to any and everybody I can for years. The first thing is join the MBRC. They got a bi-monthly bulletin they put out that has fly reports. It has pictures of loft visits, medication, how to train your birds, different articles. It's just a must have if you have any intention on competing with rollers in the United States. Get a membership with the MBRC. That's the first thing. And if you're looking to buy rollers, I wouldn't suggest going anybody that's advertising. I just wouldn't. Anybody that's advertising birds for sale, I wouldn't mess with them. I will go, and I would recommend this to anybody starting out or looking for new family possibly. Go to the master flyer list. Start at the top. Don Olette's at the top. He's the Triple Crown winner. He's won the MBRC Championship Fly. He's won the 20 bird and the 11 bird both, and he's won the World Cup. And he's at the top of the accumulated master flyer points. He's what I would call a grand master. They got a master flyer award program. It takes 750 points to accumulate, and once you get that, the next level you have to double that, get 1,500 points. At 1,500 points, you get a lifetime achievement award, which I think that's deserving of a grand master because you've got both of them. Don, I think he's almost got his third one if he hadn't already got his third.
Wow.
This guy flies some serious competition birds. So I would start there and I would just go down and see, I'd find out all I could about that family of pigeons. Do I think that family of pigeons will work well with me? And I would give them a try. You got Mark Ritter out there, a 4-time national champion that flies, a form of Don Olette's family of pigeons, and he's done quite well with them. Several other people have. So that's where I would start at, top of the master flyer list, go down. And also what part of the United States you live in, where you maybe can check out some of these master flyers, go to their house and watch their birds fly. Maybe get in on a competition day or something where they got them set as best as they can get them for that day. That's what I would recommend.
That's good advice. Is that list on like the NBRC website, or is it in their quarterly or something?
Oh yeah, nbrc.us.
Okay.
Master flyer ranking. And anything you want to hit on the NBRC and check it out, nbrc.us auction. They have auction birds on there. We just finished up with an auction for our friends in California. They have them every 2 weeks as an auction. That's another good source for you. Looking for birds, you can get some pretty quality birds from these auctions, and it helps the regions when they're going into their competitions and driving a judge around, flying a judge in. That's where these monies go to from these auctions, is to help support other flyers.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah, that's a win-win right there.
Well, yeah, we do them every 2 weeks, and they last for 2 weeks. The auctions do. In each region, or several regions, they call it in and get on a schedule, and they put it in there. And we got guys from all over the United States, top flyers, donates birds to these auctions. I'm telling you, MBRC is the way to go. It's a must-have if you're going to fly roller pigeons in the United States.
Well, it sounds like it has a lot of good resources too. So, I mean, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, get in a good local club if you got one. Get in them local flies where you're able to, fly. If they have a local fly once a month or however often, just get in there all you can.
I want to thank you for coming on, Kevin, and talking with us and breaking down, the competition side of flying Birmingham rollers. And, that's great advice too for new starters. But thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. Please help the pigeon hobby by telling your fellow club members or other pigeon friends about the podcast, and make sure to leave a good review or at least a 5-star for the podcast wherever you listen. If you have a topic or a person you want to hear more about on the podcast, or if you yourself would like to be a guest, just send an email to allaboutpigeonspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.